Broadcasting live from Washington, D.C., this is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Talking Left, your weekly alternative to the Sunday morning corporate news.
And this week, you don't have to actually listen to the David Gregory's of the world.
Yes.
The Olympics are on.
Oh, isn't that a special bonus for everybody?
Meet the peoples that David Gregory doesn't ask good questions of is not on this week.
Yes.
And you know, I'm not a big fan of the Olympics. I love Olympians.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I love Olympians.
Love the athletes and what they work for.
And I wish the Olympics were more about them than Vladimir Putin.
Yes.
But I like the Olympics this Sunday morning.
I think everybody probably likes the Olympics Sunday morning, except for maybe David Gregory.
Yeah.
Aw.
He needs a day off.
Yes. We thank you wherever you are checking us out. SoFlo Radio, We Act Radio, and soon
Progressive Voices.
Progressive Voices.
I'm so excited.
I'm very excited. We will be on Progressive Voices on TuneIn either in the coming week or a couple weeks. We're getting everything worked out with them, but we've been given the go-ahead to announce.
Yeah.
And we're
George
very
and
excited.
Reed and John and David, thank you to them.
Yes. So soon you will be able to listen on your Progressive Voices on TuneIn channel.
Yeah, on the TuneIn, and they have their own app and all that. It's really cool.
It's pretty cool.
And you've heard us talk about it when we had David on.
Yes.
David Bender,
And
of
sometimes
course.
you might hear us there on top of the hour.
That's right. That's
so,
right.
We're very excited, and we have a big show in
Huge.
store for you guys today. Justin Duckham of Talk Radio News Service, Zach Ford of Think Progress LGBT, and Jacob Dean of Filter Free Radio
The Jacob Dean.
for a full hour.
Jacob Dean was going to be here last week, and welcome back, Danielle,
Thank you.
from Florida. I hope you had a wonderful time.
It was hot.
Yeah. Well, you've now been acclimated to the north.
Yes.
We are still south of the Mason-Dixon, so we can't call you a Yankee yet. But our apologies to listeners. Justin got stuck in New York.
Yes.
He was doing a conference down in Grenada, of all places, and he knew he was traveling back late. And sure enough, he got stuck in New York City.
And I know the feeling because I have been stuck
You
in
have.
that same airport,
You have.
and it's not fun.
You're on your way to Sexy Liberal
I
in
was.
Syracuse.
Yes, we were opening for Sexy Liberal, and it was quite an adventure.
I got to drive to Buffalo at 6 a.m. instead, and you ended up on a sound studio.
Yes.
Instead of a hotel, they were making a film.
Yes. At 2 o'clock in the morning.
A long tragic story.
Yes. But we love Justin, and he'll be with us this week, and we hope that everybody, didn't miss us too much or at all.
I'll just let that one sit out there.
Yeah, okay. That's a good idea. So good morning, everybody. As usual, we like to talk about the news that you may have missed or that we think needs a little bit more attention. And I have more good stories than bad this morning because
you're all rested from a vacation.
Exactly.
You're all
and
raring to go.
And I think some of these are just awesome socialist, liberal, commie, hippie stories. And I think some people have talked about them, but I
Proof
just
that progressivism works?
Yes.
Cool.
Washington lawmakers, I think this might have something to do with the fact that they just...
How can you have a good story that starts that way?
Washington state lawmakers.
Oh, aha.
Yes.
Glad I said that. We now clarify.
Exactly. May have something to do with the fact they elected a socialist, but they are considering a bill to actually give all workers paid vacation. This might seem extreme to some people on the right, but believe it or not, we are one of the developed nations that doesn't already do this.
Right.
And we've tried to do this nationwide. People, Congress people have introduced legislation to give every worker a paid week of time off, and unsurprisingly, went nowhere.
Of course. Oh, it's going to cost too much for business. Businesses can't afford this. How in the world can we afford this?
Right.
And if we had had stronger unions over the last couple decades, we'd have it already.
Right.
This is one of those things that was the next step. That was one of the reasons they went after unions.
And there are some reasonable guidelines. The business...
Reasonable.
The business would have to have 25 workers or more.
Right. So because small businesses, it can be a real difficult, especially every person is so crucial.
Right. And somebody would have to be on the job for 6 months or more, at which point they
Right.
would only get 20 hours, so half a week of vacation.
Because you can't walk in and a month later say I want a week off.
Right. After a year, they would get 1 full week, 40 hours. After 2 years, they would get 60 hours. After 3 years, they would get 80 hours. And to get 3 weeks of vacation a year, they would have to be with the same company for 5 years or more. I think that's reasonable.
I do too.
I mean, sure, I would love for every worker to actually get that 3 weeks right off the bat because people need a break.
They do. And it's been shown over and over and over again that one, it keeps employees because there's a cost associated with bringing the new employee in. So less turnover and productivity goes up.
Right.
It goes up because there's that possibility of getting away from the workplace environment, recharging those batteries, doing those things that people love. It would be great if everyone loved their job.
Right. Well, workers in this country, unlike most other developed nations, don't get any paid sick time.
Right.
Don't get paid vacation time. So, they are a slave to their job 52 weeks a year.
Right.
And this is one bill that could actually fix that in Washington state, although the future of it is uncertain. It's not sure it's going to pass. But if you're in Washington state, perhaps give your state lawmakers a call, an email, stop by their office.
And that's the way it starts. One
Right.
state does it, and then the next door neighbor says, "Hey, we'd like that too."
Right.
That it worked out. The businesses aren't collapsing. The economy hasn't gone into a death spiral as the billionaires would have us believe.
Right.
Look, it works. Same, kind of like with same-sex marriage. All the marriages didn't explode simultaneously in Massachusetts. So other states say, "Hey, this might be a good idea."
Right.
Vermont
As
going
we're seeing-
going with single payer. When that works out, hey, we'd like that too.
Yeah, hey, that saves taxpayers a lot of money and everybody gets health care. What do you know?
So bit by bit. So it's a good story. I like it.
Another thing that I would love to see go state by state, and props to a Republican governor, Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam is setting aside $300 million to give every student, every high school graduate, a chance to at least go to a 2-year community college or technical school. He is behind a big effort called the Drive to 55 to make sure that 55% of Tennessee residents have some sort of advanced degree. Right now, only 32% of adults in that state have advanced degree, and that's 6 points below the national average. So every state in the nation, except for 6, have a higher level of college graduates than Tennessee does. So he's doing something about it.
Yeah, and it's not even just to get the percentage up. It's also that when those people do have those degrees, they're not laden with debt. We've talked about that so much.
Right.
That it should be free.
Right.
I'm sorry, throughout. If you want to go to a private school, that's something completely different. And we're not talking about equality. We're talking about equitable things that are equitable and positive. Investing in education for people is a good idea. Does it have to be Yale? No. But some modicum of higher education that can help you go out into the workforce and contribute even more, be even more productive, it only helps our economy.
Well,
and to not have that debt means that when you get that paycheck, you can go buy things
Right.
instead of giving it to a bankster.
And we did a story a few weeks back, Shane, I don't know if you remember, that said the federal government already pays 3 times more than the total cost of tuition on subsidies, tax credits, and things for college universities, financing these student loan companies, et cetera, where it would actually be a third of the price to just pay college tuition for everybody. So
It just doesn't make sense to me.
this is something that is doable across the nation, and it's an investment for everybody. This is something where we want to be able to compete with other nations. We need an educated workforce. Mm-hmm. This is a national investment. It is just as important as infrastructure and, clean energy and all of that. And, hey, I will say good job for Governor Haslam, despite the fact that he's a Republican.
Hey, stopped watches.
Yes.
I should be nicer than that, but I don't care what the letter is after your name. I don't care. If you're a D who's messing up, we're going to call you out. If you're an R who's doing something good, great.
Right.
It's not about the letters after the names. It's about the policies.
Well, and you would think that universities would be all about this, because think of how many more students. I mean, look at the insurance companies and the Affordable Care Act. They suddenly got all these new subscribers. Well, if you didn't have to go into debt and you were guaranteed an education, lots more people will go to school. It's not rocket science.
Well, they are community colleges, so they're run by the state.
Right. Okay. But if you know,
it would be nice if we had university systems that weren't based on profit and it turning into Death Stars. You know, they're so huge. They keep building and building. Even during recessions, they're huge.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think there is an argument to be made that the system of loans in this country is a problem because the universities do suck this money up. It would be nice if they gave it to their professors instead of their, football coaches.
I think
just
so.
FYI, whole different conversation. But there's a whole bunch of bad incentives in the upper levels of education in our country that if we just made it free, then the government would say, you can't spend that on that.
Well, one other really cool part from Governor Haslam, and I think he might be disowned by the Republican Party because of this, he also proposed spending $63 million to pay teachers higher salaries.
Wait.
Yeah. Higher salaries for teachers. Now, I want to see the legislation. If this is, it's only at charter schools or...
Could it be, and I don't know anything about the man, that there may be an educator or two in his family? A lot of times these things come out of personal experiences.
Could be.
These are solid policies from what I've heard. Our decision-making process can be so radically changed no matter what our ideology is based on a personal experience.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering.
I think
I would
it's
have to look that up.
A win-win. If people get free education and teachers get paid.
Who cares what the reason is?
Yeah. Teachers get paid a little more to do a very important job. I think that's a good thing. In some more frustrating news, but not surprising, the mortgage industry is still doing the same stuff that they were caught doing before they crashed our economy, along with Wall Street, of course. According to a new report issued last week by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, mortgage companies are still making people sign away their rights, they're forging paperwork, they're wrongly foreclosing on borrowers, and essentially also being flat out incompetent.
But the ninja loans are not back.
Right.
They're not essentially putting on people ridiculous loans. Are they still packaging them up and selling them?
The derivatives, I don't know. But the CFPB has come down pretty hard on several of these.
That's why we have them.
Yes, on several of these loan servicing companies. These are like the middlemen. They deal with processing payments. They deal with the foreclosure process. They are the administrative function between the bank or organization that made the loan and the homeowner. And they are doing very bad things.
Because if things go awry, they're just the middle person. Their liability is not that high. A lot of times they just, what was happening in the original crash was that they were pushing these loans out there, not even sending lawyers. No one had a lawyer. They were just like a little clerk, sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here. Here you go. Here's a bunch of money. And then they'd sell the darn thing.
Right.
Saying it was just fine. Don't worry, because no one was looking into any of this. And then the bank would buy it and then say, oh, it's just fine. No one's going to look at it. Let's package it up and sell a derivative. Oh, it's just fine. And the Standard & Poor's says, oh, yes, it's AAA. Oh, it's just fine. And sure enough, they were not fine. But it's these people in the middle. It's kind of like a derivatives trader on oil who never takes, a possession of the oil that does not have skin in the game. It's the people in the middle that are the problem.
Right. And what they've been caught doing is illegal, forging documents again. And it was so bad, in fact, that a few of these companies were banned from participating in the Home Affordable Mortgage Program, HAMP. And Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae will not deal with these servicers anymore. The CFPB...
And what do? They just close up shop and then open up under another name?
Probably. Yeah. But there's a reason that I bring this up.
Okay.
One of the things that President Obama is supporting is the end of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. He wants to put all of this money back in the hands of the private banking industry.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, you look at a story just like this. The CFPB can ban them from federal programs. Is that going to be as easy if these loans are no longer administered by Fannie and Freddie?
When it's not Fannie and Freddie, you lose authority.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, amongst other problems that could happen.
Yeah, a multitude. And on top of it, if you do want to fix something, it involves, criminal lawsuits, and then negotiation behind closed doors, and then you pay $5 billion and then they walk away.
Right. And
that hasn't worked out so well, obviously.
Speaking of criminal lawsuits, one of the things these companies were caught doing is having people, in order to get a loan modification that they are legally entitled to under this home affordable modification program.
HAMP.
Yes. They were told to sign away their legal rights.
Now, which legal rights are we talking about?
It differed for each time, but including...
I would imagine rights to sue.
Yes.
So they have to go to arbitration. That's the biggie they like to get rid of immediately. So you sign away your 7th Amendment rights.
Right.
Please go watch Hot Coffee. You will learn all about it.
Right.
What else?
Asking borrowers to sign waivers that barred them from future Why can't I say that word this morning?
Prosecution?
Is that the correct word?
I don't know. 'Cause I'm not
essentially,
understanding what
for
you're saying.
going after the loan servicing companies for fraudulent activity.
Oh, you're saying they can't sue us?
Yes, but for future unknown things that haven't even happened yet.
So it's a prospective waiver,
Right.
of liability,
Right. And the
so if we
CFPB
messed up in any way, shape, or form, you cannot sue us.
And if you don't sign this waiver, you don't get a home modification.
Wow, that'll be tested in court and be tossed.
Well, but thankfully, the CFPB is on it.
They're saying, you may not want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of like not ethical.
And back to some other good news. Alaska will have a recreational marijuana legalization vote on the ballot in August.
Cool.
Yeah, the groups there have organized enough signatures to put this before voters. As of earlier this week, it was just waiting on the lieutenant governor to approve the wording of the initiative, which everybody believed would be done. The bill is modeled like Colorado's law, regulating marijuana sales and distribution like alcohol and removing criminal penalties for recreational marijuana use. And polls say it's probably going to pass.
Cool. Because what does it take, like 4 or 5 signatures to get on a ballot? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be messing with Alaska. Shannon Moore is going to get mad at me.
Yes.
And you could call it a re-legalization effort, but Alaska came into the union after criminalization. So, but in terms of a national policy, they're re-legalizing.
I think it's great news, and it'll be one more state, just like we were talking about with the vacation.
Sure.
That one more state adopts a policy, sees that the state didn't blow up, realizes, hey, there's some great tax revenue and medical benefits here,
right.
And people can...
And when I say that, they realize, but it takes a little bit of time because there's that bumpy road in between where you have the places like Fox News who find the anecdotes and then try to extrapolate it out.
Anecdotes that often aren't even true.
Aren't true,
Yeah.
and then they confabulate, etc. So there is that bumpy period in between. I'm not going to say it's going to be smooth sailing, but after the truth comes out, then everyone says, "Oh, okay, this is going to be fine."
I think it's a great news, and it's just another state to push our nation closer and closer to full re-legalization, and it's about time.
I agree.
So
it's a silly law. And way too many people are ending up behind bars.
Exactly. So those are just a few stories. We have some really big stories to talk about today, and we're going to get to them in just a few minutes. Of course,
big.
The TPP, the CBO report, all kinds of stuff, and great guests. You're listening to what's going on there, Shano?
I don't know. For some reason, I got a spot instead of my music.
All right.
Very strange.
Well,
now we'll get music.
Okay.
My automator went crazy.
It happens. It's early. It's still sleepy. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle, and Shano, and we'll be back with more, so stick around.
A beautiful place full of wonderful things just waiting to be experienced.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
No way. Hey, I'm Eric from Sam Adams, here to get craft beer drinkers' reaction as they secretly taste Sam Adams Boston Lager.
It's got a good body.
It's got a great taste.
It's very smooth. I like that.
Think you've had this beer before?
No.
This is Sam Adams Boston Lager.
Sam Adams! I was going to say Sam Adams.
That's easy to drink.
It's tasty. It's a very flavorful, drinkable beer.
Smooth, but it does have flavor.
I love a Boston Lager.
What this test did is it put Sam Adams back on the map for me.
Boston Beer Company, Boston, Mass. Save responsibly. This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Common Lounge. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office released its budget and economic outlook, but not every news outlet had their facts straight when covering the CBO report's findings. CNN senior White House correspondent Brianna Keeler got it right.
The report says Americans may choose to work fewer hours or not at all to maintain their eligibility for Medicaid or federal subsidies, or because they can now purchase insurance on the individual market rather than relying on an employer. The report says that will cause a reduction of the labor force equal to more than 2 million workers in 2017, 2.5 million by 2024.
While this is good news for America's workforce, conservative news outlets were eager to misreport this information and claim that the Affordable Care Act would cost jobs. CNN's Carol Costello corrected the record about this conservative spin on the CBO report, explaining,
to be clear, the CBO did not say jobs would actually be lost. It said workers could choose to work fewer hours to meet Obamacare requirements for coverage. But when you cut through the spin, this is all about workers' choices, not job cuts.
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
This is the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. Patriot Made Audiocast. Morgan DeBrew is a marketing manager for Orion Rugs of Anderson, South Carolina.
Our total focus is on area rugs. We are totally made in the USA.
We met up with her in the spacious Orion showroom at the Atlanta International Gift and Home Furnishings Show.
I think the pendulum has swung back into the States rather than being proud of something being imported, and I think it actually means something to the consumer.
Orion employs over 400 folks in Anderson, South Carolina, which makes them a big part of the city of just under 26,000. While the company has a warehouse in Canada to handle its exports, everything else is domestic.
We actually are vertically integrated, and our yarn is made in-house in our Anderson facility.
The yarn is made from domestically sourced polypropylene, which is a sort of plastic.
Small pellets that are then extruded, and yarn is produced in filaments from that.
Morgan says that the yarn and finished rugs meet all U.S. fire safety regulations.
We have to abide by many flammability tests.
And that Orion is proud to be green.
We are a zero landfill manufacturer. We have created a team called the Growing Green Team.
The company has been zero waste to landfill since 2008. So if I went into Anderson, I mentioned that I wanted to buy an Orion area rug, the whole town would know about you guys?
You're exactly right. They definitely would. They would probably know exactly where we were, right on Highway 81, and would know how to get there for our manufacturing facility as well as the outlet store in our area.
Thank you, Morgan DeBrew from Orion Rugs of Anderson, South Carolina. I'm Rita Rich, Patriot Made. This is the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you for hanging out with us this morning. Our automation software seems to be going a little crazy today.
It was fine. It was fine. It just something. It played the second thing instead of the first thing.
Yeah, it happens.
It was being a little random for me. That's okay.
You know, you've neglected it for 2 weeks.
That's true. Although, no, I played the repeat through the automation last week. So, no, it was okay. Whatever the case.
I wanted to talk about this amazing new report from Media Matters about coverage of big stories on the corporate news media. If you were...
Did you put coverage in quotes?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
If you're listening to this show, you may or may not listen to some of the major corporate networks. But if you care about issues like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, about net neutrality, Keystone, the amazing Keystone vigils that took place,
right?
You're not getting coverage that you care about in the corporate news. This story from Media Matters specifically focused on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and showed that some channels have not covered it at all, and a few have mentioned it, a handful of times in the last 6 weeks. MSNBC, for one, mentioned it 30 times over the last 6 months. So while it's very important that people learn about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and learn why it's such a risk, people are also getting really involved in anti-TPP efforts,
Right.
anti-NSA surveillance effort, asking the FCC to restore net neutrality. Over 1 million people signed a petition at freepress.net. These are millions of people getting involved.
They are, and they're getting involved in learning about it, despite the fact that corporate media, who have a vested interest in certain policies,
Right.
let's just be blunt about this, they would benefit from the passage of the TPP. They will benefit from a lack of net neutrality. These are things where they make money, and the majority of the people whom they're supposed to be serving suffer as a result of it.
Right.
But because they can make a profit, they're not going to cover it. But despite that, there are still millions of people, thanks to grassroots efforts.
Right.
Thanks to the fact that for right now, we're in that transition period on net neutrality where there still is information and access to these types of issues, but they're getting together. But yet again, while the policy isn't being covered, nor is those that are protesting these policies.
That's what stands out to me the most. For instance, 4,000 groups, 4,000 have organized the Day We Fight Back. Groups like Daily Coast, Demand Progress, ACLU, Free Press, Freedom of the Press Foundation, the EFF. I mean, really strong, amazing organizations that represent tens of millions of people who are members of these groups have organized one day, which will be February 11th, against NSA internet surveillance. Have you heard about this in the corporate media?
No.
Or 550 different groups that signed a letter to Congress urging them to vote against Fast Track. Didn't hear about that.
Even though Harry Reid did it anyway.
Right.
He said, we'll not be doing that. And it's best that you don't even bring that up to me anymore, or I'm going to punch you in the head.
I don't think he said that.
But that's what I hope he said.
He was a boxer, wasn't he?
And that's a shout out to Ray Medeiros.
Yes.
I'll punch you in the head.
But point being is, just like when the Iraq War happened, we had millions of people protesting and zero coverage on the corporate media. 4 Tea Partiers show up and they bring out the news vans.
They do. We've seen them.
The corporate media isn't just ignoring these issues. They are failing the millions of progressive individuals that want coverage and want people to see that they are out in the streets, that they are mounting huge campaigns against or for these issues. And it just shows why independent media is so important. And, it makes me really thankful that we have great listeners that listen to this show.
And great outlets that carry.
Right.
Us and our friends.
That's right.
So.
Some of whom we're going to talk to in just a little while.
No kidding.
So anyhow, that's my riff for the day. We're going to get into that.
And it was a fine riff.
We're going to get into that probably a little more with Jacob Dean later, but
I would imagine we would.
Yes. It seems like something he might have a few opinions on.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So we are going to come back with more. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle, and Shano. Don't go anywhere.
It reflects the drama of the human experience. And isn't that the essence of art?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Were you invited to the big doings in Davos? The annual powwow of power elites held in that posh resort town in the Swiss Alps. The World Economic Forum, as is formally called, brings together a bunch of corporate chieftains, the heads of state from various countries, an A-list of entertainment sparklies, and a horde of economists, consultants, and lesser politicos trying to get noticed. The theme of this year's Wine, Dine, and Shine show was the reshaping of the world. How modest is that? But you can't expect modesty from an event that's been dubbed, quote, a velvet rope club for the 1% of the 1%. Or, as the mayor of London once put it, a constellation of egos involved in massive mutual orgies of adulation. Maybe that's why the big news from Davos this year was not who attended, but the platinum-level biggies who spurned the invite, such as Warren Buffett, along with the honchos of Apple, Facebook, and Google. It seems that many are put off by the declining level of speakers and panelists. As if to emphasize that decline, the forum organizers even brought in Governor Rick Oops Perry of Texas to be on a healthcare panel. Now that's industrial strength chutzpah. After 14 years as governor, Perry's state still has a fourth of its people with no health insurance, the ugliest performance of all 50 states. Indeed, if Davos attendees need an example of how a public official who enjoys government-paid health care can so crassly deny any coverage to millions of the less fortunate, Perry's their man. This is Jim Hightower saying, adding to the forum's unintended satire of elites without a clue, a major sub-theme this year was how to address economic inequality. One way would be to invite at least one person who's on the receiving end of inequality. Maybe one of Rick Perry's uninsured constituents.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. During Chicago's polar vortex, January 28th, that sent temperatures plunging below zero and closed schools, Rhiannon Broschott faced a dilemma. The single mom and Whole Foods worker had to scramble to find child care for her special needs child and was unable to do so. So she called off work to care for her child. Whole Foods fired her. On Wednesday in Chicago, the Workers' Organizing Committee of Chicago demanded that Whole Foods give Rhiannon her job back. The Chicago Teachers Union and community supporters held a strike protest at Whole Foods on Halsted Street, demanding Whole Foods reinstate Rhiannon. Teachers Union President Karen Lewis says while companies like Whole Foods profess family values, they don't really act in support of those values. Lewis says you don't fire people for taking care of their children in inclement weather. The International Transport Workers Federation, ITF, is launching a global campaign for a fight for gender justice and safety for women transport workers. The action plan was started at a conference of ITF women transport workers in India. Diana Holland is chair of the ITF's Women's Committee and Assistant General Secretary of Unite in the UK. She says this campaign is a pragmatic effort to give women transport workers the support they need.
What we know is that we are not isolated, we're not on our own, and we can try and take on some of these forces that are affecting us internationally, that are affecting us in our workplaces. We can stand together and say we're not going to have women at the forefront of bearing the brunt of the crisis or the measures that are being taken in order to deal with it. And we're not going to have any transport workers treated the way that they are in some workplaces, some industries, some sectors, some parts of our sectors. And all of us are saying, this bottom line here, we're not going to be the race to the bottom, we're going to be the race to the top.
The ITF's Alison McGarry says the themes of the ITF conference stem from practical conditions that women transport workers are facing and the power of unified action to address them.
Fighting against violence against women comes from the sisters' experience. It feeds into our work programme and into the day-to-day work that our affiliates are undertaking. It's really practical. It's about the sisters who are organisers talking about their experiences.
The audio used in this report is courtesy of Radio Labor. Republican governors and state lawmakers in 24 states are blocking 5 million low-income Americans from getting insurance coverage through Medicaid. MoveOn.org and other progressive organizations are pushing to get Medicaid coverage expanded to those states. In December, Iowa Republican Governor Terry Branstad decided to expand Medicaid coverage, and Utah Republican Governor Gary Herbert followed suit recently. 9 Republican governors have expanded Medicaid. All over the country, activists are calling on GOP leaders to stop blocking Medicaid health care coverage for the 5 million people who qualify but can't get it because Republicans are refusing to expand it in states that they control. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
So when you get to the corner of Smith and Orchard, you're going to want to take a
left.
You are
not going to
Then what you're going
to
do is turn onto Marcy Avenue.
just broke up
and go past the first 3 lights
happy
and then
about
take
it.
the next left.
I don't really
then drive
think
5
she's
more
happy,
blocks
but
and you should be
who
there.
am I to judge, right?
Park on the right.
That's
I'll
what
see
I
you
heard
later
last
tonight.
night.
It's hard to concentrate on 2 things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are checking us out, listening to the replay play on iTunes or over on our website, talkingleft.com, or SoFlo Radio, or We Act Radio, or soon to be Progressive Voices. I don't know how many out there watched the Super Bowl last week.
Liberty porn?
Yes, that's what Shane decided it was called. This is what happens when Fox.
This is what happens when Fox gets a hold of the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And I have no problem with the Declaration of Independence. I think it's a wonderful document. It's revolutionary. But if you're going to read something, why don't you read the Bill of Rights?
Yeah. Well, they don't like that one so much, except for the second one. They'll just read the second one 10 times.
And the 10th.
Yes.
2 and 10.
Yes.
2 and 10. 2 and 10.
Exactly.
2 and 10. And 9 maybe. But it was odd.
It was very odd. And
by the way, as we were talking about the Olympics as well, let's point something out as especially American journalists are complaining, moaning, pointing and laughing. One of the rings didn't light up. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Remember the Super Bowl 2 years ago?
Yeah.
In our country.
Where a little problem.
Where the power went out for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So just remember that, ethnocentric Americans.
We're going to get into that a little bit with Zach Ford in next hour. And also about the LGBT issues in Russia.
Cool.
So we're going to talk to him about that. But speaking of
Fox,
Fox,
I look forward to that.
Speaking of Fox News, they were in a huff this week. They were in an uproar about the new report from the Congressional Budget Office.
They weren't in an uproar. They were in an I told you so, yay, and vote for us so that we can help so we can help you. I was going to say billionaires.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice there.
But yeah.
Yeah, but even the author, first of all, this Congressional Budget report, Congressional Budget Office came out and said that the Affordable Care Act will reduce the labor participation rate and the total number of hours to an equivalent of 2 million jobs by 2017. So Fox News,
said,
my goodness,
we're going to lose 2 million jobs.
We're going to lose 2 million jobs.
Which is not true.
Because they care so much.
Yeah, they care.
But even the author of the report says that's not true.
Right. You may want to read the report, but they actually don't, because even if they read the report and understood the report completely, they're not in the business of putting out the truth.
Right.
They're in the business of putting out a certain political perspective for a certain political party. And therefore it doesn't matter what it says. They wanted this to happen. They wanted millions of jobs to be lost. So they got a report that might, if you were to contort it and take every third word, say that, but it doesn't.
Right.
It absolutely doesn't.
The author of this report, Doug Elmendorf, please forgive me, sir,
I think that's correct. That's the way I've heard it.
He completely refuted the claim that the Affordable Care Act is a job killer.
Right.
He said that is a misleading takeaway from the report, and it's simply being touted by Obamacare critics.
Right. And this labor participation rate, this is a statistics, and I bet you, I know I didn't pay any attention to for forever until a couple of years ago when they weren't getting high enough numbers in terms of unemployment, because they want to trash the economy, and they want to trash the economy and therefore blame Democrats. But as the unemployment rate has gone down, let's look at the labor participation rate, which is very low.
Right.
The percentage of people that are working compared to the number of people that aren't. But that also includes baby boomers who are retiring. This is something we've known about, that this bubble of retirees was going to be happening. I mean, back in the 80s, they doubled Social Security taxes because we knew all these people were going to be retiring. They are not working. So the labor participation rate is skewed. And on top of it, working at a job is a good thing. But you should be able to do it on your terms.
Right.
Terms that are mutually beneficial, that it helps your employer and that it helps you, not because you're essentially a de facto slave.
Right.
And we have had policies by the conservatives for decades that have enslaved workers.
Absolutely.
And this report cuts away at one of those things that makes people work in jobs that they hate for next to no money.
Right. Think how many people are out there working simply because they had to have health insurance.
Right. They've got a sick child. So their employer
they
probably
have a
knows
pre-existing condition and couldn't have a gap in insurance coverage.
Right.
Things like that. Yes, Mr. Elmendorf, he explained the difference here. And I think this is really well said. He said, if someone comes up to you and says, the boss says I'm being laid off because we don't have enough business to pay, any other person feels bad about that, and we sympathize for them having lost their job. But if someone comes up to you and says, I decided to retire or stay home or spend more time with my family or spend more time doing my hobby, then we don't feel bad.
Or building my invention or starting my business.
We say congratulations to that person.
Right.
All of a sudden, 2 million people will be able to stay home with their family if they want to not be a slave to a job.
It's free. It's liberty. It's a better allocation of resources.
Right.
Workers' resources. Employers don't care about, they care about paying as little as they can for the highest productivity they can get. And that gap is where the wealth has gone.
Mm-hmm.
People who aren't willing to work for that $7.25, $7.50, if there are less of them out there, they're not going to be able to take that gravy, that gap anymore. They're actually going to have to pay people more. You have to incentivize them to come back to the workforce to make it worth their while. Or they're just not going to. And you're going to actually have to, there's going to be less people vying for those jobs. It's not going to be 6 to 1 anymore because the people who want to do something else are doing that. Wages will necessarily go up. They don't like that idea. They want to have people indebted.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make sure that even if you are going to get help from the government, that you have to work that minimum wage job too, welfare to work.
Yes.
They want you to have lots of school loans. They want you to have credit card loans. They want you to have to work in that lousy job.
Right. Regardless of how much you hate it, regardless of how much you're abused, and regardless of the low pay.
And when you ask for a raise, no. When you ask for you're sick for a day off, no,
Nope.
You better get in here. I'd like to take a week of vacation. No, we'll hire somebody else. Some of that leverage, essentially what's happening is that the leverage of healthcare is gone.
At least partially, yes.
And I like that. And that it is a win for workers. And believe it or not, businesses will understand after a while. It's a win for them because you are going to get people who actually want to do the job. You're going to have people that you actually pay that actually don't resent you for the job they have. You're going to find that people, because they can move, sometimes geographically there isn't a job that suits your skills. So you're going to be able to move across the country or across the state or to another town where that job is that you can do better.
Right.
So there's that
well, and you think about the argument for lowering the retirement age. And
Sure.
I know conservatives' heads explode at this one. We can't afford for more people to retire early. But what that does is, we have people with advanced degrees, people who are, 50, 60 years old, working in a very low-paying, undervalued job because they have to stay for insurance. They have to stay for their...
Until that magic number of 65.
Right. Where this is kind of similar to that argument of lowering the retirement age where you open up jobs for younger people, you allow people more leisure time, there's a lot of benefits.
I remember learning in social studies long, long time ago. It was like the equivalent of civics, I guess. That, in cultures that are just developing, everyone works, everyone hunts, or everyone farms and all that, until you have technological breakthroughs that allow you to do these things more efficiently. Machines, or, you're allocating certain people to do certain things and what happens is you all of a sudden this leisure time occurs, that there's more hours in the week than you must work. And during that time is when people have time for the arts and sciences and thought and invention. You get the things like Renaissance.
Right.
Having a labor force that has to work 3 jobs, because that's all American, according to George Bush, you lose out on all the talents of these individuals who are just going to this job because they need it for healthcare.
Right.
It frees them up to have the innovation that conservatives love to applaud, but don't give you any time to do.
Yes.
This is a good thing. And they want to spin it as a bad thing politically, but they also, I think they know deep in their hearts, this is not good for billionaires.
Right. Well, they don't like anything that's not good for billionaires. And you think about the issues that our world as a whole is dealing with, climate change,
Sure.
some cancers, really big, important issues that we need the smartest minds working on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those people can't afford to put time aside to work on issues unless it's their primary job, which is, more and more rare these days.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had great minds who are stuck in some trivial, meaningless job because they need to for health insurance,
right,
all of a sudden, those people can help on these bigger
and great
issues.
great minds who got a higher education in the state of Tennessee, thanks to a Republican governor. You know, it all feeds itself.
Yes.
And you can have a spiral that's upward. And this is one of those things that I really believe is going to help.
I think so too. And I think it's going to, as you said earlier, Vermont going single payer. And we're seeing this state by state effort, even when it comes to things like fighting the NSA. You're now seeing progressives and whatever letter is behind your name realize that, hey, we can use the 10th Amendment to our advantage too. Yeah. I think this could be another way we do.
And I'm sorry, I'm probably going sideways or at least backwards. That part of that leisure time, I think they're a little worried about, means that someone can make up a sign, put it on a stick, and go out in front of their congressperson's office and protest.
Right.
Or in front of their employers or wherever it be. There's time for activism. There is time to make social change.
You could have hit the nail on the head right there.
So that you can have a couple million people show up to protest the NSA or the TPP.
Or
they're not working three jobs.
Right.
Because what's all American is being able to petition your government.
I think you just nailed it, Shane. And all of these issues go right back, to having time to care about them, having time to care about something besides
everyone has time to
your
care.
Job.
Doing something about it takes time and it takes effort. And people are motivated. It's just that after you've worked that third shift, what you got to sleep.
Exactly.
Funny thing about people, they got to sleep at some point.
Right. And by the way, just in case, someone from Fox News happens to be listening, which we doubt, that same CBO report that they are railing, saying it's awesome, it's, Obamacare sucks. Yeah. That
is the Chiron, I think.
Yeah, I think that is. That same report says, oh, by the way, the ACA is expected to boost the economy in the near and long term. So just in case you're listening, it will improve the economy, boost demand for overall goods and services over the next few years. So go ahead, keep touting that report, Fox, but we're going to remind people that there's actually good things in it.
And the thing is they can talk about it like this, and they may win politically in the short term, but as the act and the actual results hit people, the proof is in the pudding.
Yes.
It'll all work out.
It will.
And I think the president knew it was going to be bumpy. And I think certain things were more bumpy than he thought, and certain things probably weren't as bumpy. But are we going to talk about the bailout?
Oh, we can talk about that next. We supposed to.
Because
yes.
This goes with the ACA, because talk about something that's going to be a little bumpy, and I don't think has been covered much, has just kind of been whispered about.
Right. Remember those words, insurance company bailout, because you're going to hear them a lot over the next few months and possibly longer, and we'll explain what that means in just a moment. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle, and Shano, and we will be back with more, so stick around.
Hey, it's Hal Sparks from the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, and this is Talking Left.
Filter-free radio.
Filter-free radio. Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean. With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
The news of raising the minimum wage sounded great. $11.50 an hour in Washington, D.C. and in Maryland, in the counties in Maryland, where I used to live in Montgomery County. Sounds great, but I thought I heard something in there that wasn't too hot. What was that one little bit there?
That's scheduled to be in place by 2016.
Oh, that part. Right. Yeah, well, sure, we'll throw you a bone. A couple years from now. So what is your New Year's revolution? Do you make minimum wage and you can't survive?
Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
The fact of the matter is, it's not nearly enough, doesn't go far enough. Raising the minimum wage will help people, and as part of building resistance movements, getting those disenfranchised college students who are unemployed and underemployed, along with the service sector workers who are all living in poverty. If you're able to get those two facets of our society together and organize them, well, then we should have a revolt. We should have, enough to shut down parts of our system in order to demand a higher living standard, better quality of life, just for starters. And nothing will change unless you make it. So hope should be a goal, not just a wish. and then you do something about it.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Samantha Wyatt. In a Change.org petition, high school student Jewel Moore asked Disney to consider a plus-size princess character, saying it would help girls who feel ugly for not fitting the skinny standard. Fox and Friends invited Emmy, a plus-size supermodel, and Mimi Roth, a self-described obesity expert, on to discuss the petition.
Beauty within our children's movie and entertainment industry is askew to the thinner side.
Oh, please. Katniss is fit. Mulan was fit. Pocahontas was fit.
Those are a few. Pocahontas. There's a few representations outside of
so
a
you
whole
want them to be
array
plus
of
size?
beauty.
You want them to be overweight? This sounds like mob mentality. No, I'm not missing any plus size.
What I'm saying.
It's unhealthy. If you like cancer and diabetes, if you want fertility problems, then plus size is beautiful.
It is important to note that plus size does not mean obese. Plus Model magazine reports that plus size models are on average between the sizes of 6 and 14. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
What hypocrites we all are. When we like a particular president of the United States, that president can do little or no wrong. But if we don't like that president or his party, often he can do little or no right, period. Case in point, President Obama announced in his State of the Union address that he would make wider use of his powers of executive order, including, for example, ordering an increase in the minimum hourly wage paid to employees of all employers working under federal contracts. And predictably enough, he's been denounced from various conservative pundits and commentators for this announcement, being called all kinds of names for what are called illegal or unconstitutional, or at least unprecedented arrogation of power. But all presidents of both parties have used this power, including on huge issues. President Lincoln, the Republican, used the executive order powers to issue his famous Emancipation Proclamation, rather than trust or depend on Congress to do so, and thank goodness he did. President Truman, a Democrat, used an executive order to ban racial discrimination in the United States military. And President Kennedy, a Democrat also, banned racial discrimination in federally financed housing. President Nixon, a Republican, even imposed wage and price controls by executive order in 1971 and created the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration the same way. And President Reagan, Republican, ordered re-emphasis on federalism by federal agencies. And President George W. Bush created the Department of Homeland Security by executive order. And in each of these instances, no doubt, members and supporters of the opposite party offered various levels of criticism, proving the point that what's right and wrong with presidents is so subjective. Our president can do no wrong, the other party's president can do no right. But we at least ought to be honest with ourselves. We are all hypocrites. This is Wycor hearing a different drummer for the Progressive Voices Network on TuneIn.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Please be sure to go over and like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Talking Left, and follow us on Twitter at Talking Left, and leave your comments, whatever they may be.
Suggestions.
Yes.
Felling, whichever.
Right before the break, we were talking about this CBO report and Affordable Health Care Act. And Shane, you mentioned the insurance company bailout.
Yeah,
Please explain.
This has got to be Frank Luntz.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be. Some pollster has figured out that people don't like the word bailout and they don't like insurance companies. Now, I can understand not liking either one of those things, but there's a part of the Affordable Care Act which is neither of those things, but the Republicans are going to be calling it that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here's the deal. We have, when the Affordable Care Act was set up, we were asking insurance companies, much to our chagrin, but the way it's set up is that insurance companies are going to be providing this affordable care through this bill, through these exchanges, and they're going to be required with no caps, all kinds of different types of regulations and things that insurance companies haven't done before. They're actually going to have to pay for things,
right? And
they're only going to be able to take a certain percentage as their overhead, etc. The problem is there wasn't a mathematical model for how to figure out what the premiums are. You have these things called adjusters. These are people that go to school for statistics and in trying to figure out all of these types of models and how to set the price of something that you don't know the cost of down the road. So they're trying to make their best estimates as to what to charge for this, knowing how many people might come in or will not come in, how many sick people, how many not sick people, etc., so that they still stay solvent.
Right.
Because they do have to pay out money for healthcare.
They have to be able to pay claims, and even though it's a smaller percentage, they do have to be able to pay salaries.
And they're going to do their best to come up with the correct price so that at the end of the day, 85% of the money they take in goes out towards healthcare. Everyone's covered under the rules that are set up where you can't deny pre-existing conditions and there aren't caps, etc. And that they aren't running out of money. Or that they're not making a huge amount. When they pay everything out, they don't have 50% of what they took in left.
Right.
So they put in this part of the bill, which essentially is a fund that will take money in from the insurance companies if they make too much and pay money out if they become essentially insolvent because they miscalculated these numbers because they just didn't. They're making their best guesses.
Right.
But they might mess up.
Right.
In the first couple of years. It's a way, first of all, you have to entice these companies to come in, despite how they've acted, right? You can't say, hey, trust us, and if you go out of business, tough. And at the same time, you can't have them taking advantage of the system saying, well, we don't know how much it is.
So we're going to charge everybody $1,000.
$1 gazillion.
Yeah.
All right? So this is a way to insure the insurance.
Right.
Not bailing them out.
It's a fund saying if the insurance company didn't estimate correctly and the premiums they charged were too low, that the government will reimburse them the cost
and anyone might
out of a fund.
But that fund, maybe other insurance companies charge too much. And it isn't the government. This is a fund that is a buffer to, and then essentially what's going to happen is once they have this for a year or two, they're going to say, now we know the parameters. Now we know the likelihoods. We know the percentages. We can set the amount that's the right price for premiums.
Right.
And therefore, we don't need this fund anymore. It's very temporary. It's a couple of years. Republicans want to use this to kill the Affordable Care Act. They want to repeal that part of it, and they're going to make it a part of negotiations. And it's a very hard thing to explain. We just spent a couple minutes explaining it, and we probably
still missed
key parts of this.
Right.
But if you can say, we want to repeal the insurance company bailout, wow, does that work?
Yes.
And what will happen is insurance companies say, to heck with this, we're out of here. And the whole thing collapses.
Or we have to go to single payer. Just saying.
Well, but count on this being part of debt ceiling negotiations.
We've already heard it a few times from people on the right. It's I've heard it once or twice.
I think it was Mitch.
Yeah, but we're going to hear this more and more.
It's my buddy Mitch.
Mitch McTurtle.
Yeah.
Yes. So watch for it, and when you hear your Republican friends and family members, or even some on the left, why do the insurance companies need a bailout? This is what it is. It's a fund to say
it's an adjustment period while they're bringing in the
exactly.
act.
They are still bound by either the 80-20 rule or the 85-15 rule, depending on the size of the insurance company, where they have to spend 80 to 85% of what they bring in on healthcare.
So they don't get a windfall, but at the same time they don't get messed up by making errant calculations.
And hey, when you hear this talking point, you can remind people that if they don't like that, feel free to go to socialized single payer. We would love that. So anyhow, that's the insurance company bailout. Remember it. Don't fall for it. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we'll be back with Justin Duckham of the Talk Radio News Service coming up next.
It's just implied, but we all know what's going on in this thought bubble. The kids don't know, but we do.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Terrestrial radio, they don't want us or yous around no more, so...
They hit us, so we hit them back.
SoFloRadio.com.
Now, the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn presents the Green News Report.
There's an enormous amount of political pressure within the Beltway to approve this project.
Keystone XL pipeline moves one step closer to approval.
Rain, incessant rain.
Britain pummeled by record floods. Another coal-related spill contaminates drinking water in North Carolina. Plus, The Arctic wins again. For now, Shell Oil drops plans to drill this summer.
All of those victories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Poor Atlanta. I love Atlanta. What a thing they went through. Did you see that? Drivers were stranded. Traffic was at a standstill. And everybody there was asking the same question. What did we do to piss off Chris Christie?
Yep. This is your Green News Report.
Oh, I kid, Chris Christie.
Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air today, word is inside the Republican caucus, they are deciding whether or not to tie an increase in the debt limit to the president's approval of the Keystone XL pipeline.
Oh, Republicans are holding hostages again, are they?
They are indeed.
Well, it seems unlikely Obama will fall for that, but we'll have more on Keystone XL in a moment. First, some quick headlines. Another toxic spill thanks to coal. In North Carolina, a broken pipe from a huge coal ash waste pond spilled toxic sludge and wastewater into the Dan River near Eden, North Carolina. Coal plant owner Duke Energy waited 24 hours to tell the public. Water treatment plants say it shouldn't affect water quality for now.
This is from a coal ash waste pond, the waste that they store in great big ponds that are incredibly toxic and will poison the drinking water and everything else if they leak, and now we have a leak.
Right, and they're mostly unregulated by the federal government.
Why regulate safe drinking water?
Insane record flooding continues in Britain.
The worst tidal surge in 60 years and rain, incessant rain.
After record relentless rainfall refuses to let up, scientists say that chronic flooding shows the UK's plans to harden their infrastructure against rising sea levels due to climate change will not be sufficient. But some good news. Shell Oil has again postponed their plans to drill for oil in the harsh extremes of the Arctic for the second summer in a row. That's after their nearly disastrous attempt back in 2012. Shell's new CEO suggests they may abandon the effort altogether.
This is after Shell's comedy of errors where their rigs kept crashing, running into ice. They had to call it off early. Now they're saying, maybe it's not such a good idea to tear up the Arctic like that just because, it's melting.
That's pretty much it. Now on to the Keystone XL. The State Department waited until late on a Friday to release its final environmental impact report on the controversial proposed Keystone XL pipeline from Canada. The key question, does it meet the threshold for approval that President Obama set in his historic climate action speech back in June?
National interest will be served only if this project does not significantly exacerbate the problem of carbon pollution.
Billions of dollars in oil profits and the planet's climate are riding on that word, significant, and this environmental impact report is something of a Rorschach test for both critics and opponents.
Wait, I only heard billions of dollars in profit. The rest of that part was blah, 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 blah.
Well, put it very basically, the State Department confirms that the pipeline would contribute to total global emissions. But the State Department says Canada's going to dig up those tar sands regardless. So this single pipeline project would not make that much of a difference to global emissions. That gives Obama a little bit of wiggle room either way.
So in other words, what they're saying is, hey, these dirty tar sands are going to be exploited, whether we put them through a pipeline or whether we put them on trains. So whether we have the pipeline or not does not substantially increase carbon emissions.
That's essentially what they're saying, but opponents of the pipeline disagree. And they add that if Canada is going to dig up these tar sands regardless of whether the pipeline is built, then why are we in America putting our water supplies and lands at risk so Canada can ship oil to China? How is that in the national interest?
If you're going to ask intelligent questions, I don't know where to go from here, Desi.
Well, the White House is giving no indication either way, but in an interview with Bill O'Reilly of Fox News, President Obama did debunk the outlandish jobs claims peddled by the fossil fuel industry.
Keystone Pipeline, new study comes in, 42,000 jobs. You're going to okay it, I assume.
Well, first of all, it's not 42,000. That's not correct. It's a couple thousand to build the pipeline.
And in fact, the president was being generous there. The State Department report actually says 50 permanent jobs can be expected from the pipeline. Not hundreds of thousands, not 42,000, not even a couple of thousand, but 50.
And there were hundreds of vigils in 49 states to protest the Keystone XL pipeline on Monday, calling on President Obama to fulfill those promises to take action against climate change. The State Department must now decide whether the pipeline is in the national interest. The public gets 30 days to comment starting now. Other agencies will weigh in. No decision is expected before early summer.
For much more on that and the other things John Kerry is going to turn tail on, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help sponsor the Green News Report and to celebrate 10 years of bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Carry on my wayward son. There'll be peace when you are done.
Broadcasting live from Washington, D.C., this is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are checking us out. We Act Radio, SoFlo Radio, checking out the podcast, or soon to be listening on Progressive Voices on TuneIn. This week, John Boehner said that he will not advance immigration reform until Republicans can trust the president.
Have they ever trusted the president?
I don't know, but joining us now to explain that and perhaps maybe remember if Republicans ever trusted the president is Justin Duckham, the chief Washington correspondent of the Talk Radio News Service. You can check it out at talkradionews.com. You can follow him on Twitter at @JDuckham. Justin, call me crazy, but I don't remember any time when Republicans have trusted the president.
You know, that certainly is a good point. And, I was racking my brain as soon as you said that. And I guess the only thing that I could think of was in the early days of his administration when we got the Recovery Act passed. But, things have certainly changed a lot since then. We've foreseen the, House take a much more sort of strident tone. We've seen it, of course, fall to the Republicans. We saw a situation in 2010 where the, crazies kind of took over. And it's something that has not yet really repaired itself. So they are still dealing with that monster, and asking them to trust the president continues to be the equivalent of saying this will happen when hell freezes over. And basically, it's just a admission from Boehner that he is willing to do this, that there are Republicans willing to do this, but that in his kind of coded message, they simply just don't have the votes to do it yet.
Yeah, and I would argue during the Recovery Act, the Republicans didn't trust him either. I mean, Arlen Specter went for it, and they chased him out of the Republican Party.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I take this in my reading of the quotes from Boehner's press conference to say that, as you said, we don't have the votes for it. We are going to continue to block immigration, but they can't come up with a valid reason to do so. They have no economic reason. They have no, social reason. So they've pulled this trust talking point, and I've seen it all over Fox now that they can't trust the president. Would you say that's a safe bet, that they just can't come up with a better excuse?
Well, I mean, it makes sense on paper for why you're doing this. Whereas, of course, the economic argument that this is going to create more jobs, this is going to lead to more taxable income, this is going to be a major boon for Americans. You also have the moral argument that there are people in the country working extremely hard who, should be given the rights of citizenship if they are willing to go through, a few, rings of fire that, lawmakers set up. And, there really is no valid argument for this except that there is a strident fringe of the party who is opposed to pretty much anything the president does, regardless of size, and, certainly opposed to this since this, on one hand kind of scares the, people in deep red districts who voted them in the first place, and it is also giving the, legislative branch a chance to, sort of look good here. There's been a piece of longstanding wisdom that House Republicans may in fact be trying to sabotage immigration reform on the off chance that they'll be able to take back the Senate and therefore be able to do it fully under, Republican statutes, as well as in a situation where Republicans will get full credit for it, since, they're certainly not doing very well with the demographics that certainly care about immigration reform, so that would make sense to a certain degree. But it certainly does signal that immigration reform seems to be dead as far as 2014 is concerned.
This is an issue that so many American citizens, voting citizens care about, just like unemployment insurance, just like so many issues. I can't see how this wouldn't hurt Republicans in elections, but is it just that, their districts are so white, are so red, that that this is somehow a winning issue for them?
No, it is, and we know a lot of those districts, things that seem like common sense really don't catch up as fast. And this seems to be a pretty clear-cut example of it. This isn't the the Republican Party, I'm sure, have the desire to no longer be the anti-immigration party. They don't necessarily want to be that, especially when they're in a situation where they're going to lose national election after national election, quite possibly due to this very issue. And I think there certainly is a desire among the smarter elements of the party to try to get something done to, at least save some kind of face and no longer be that your father's Republican Party. But again, Boehner is dealing with a very divided caucus. It's something that he's been dealing with for quite some time. And it really shows how sort of fickle they are with the announcements that we see from Boehner time and time again, where he promises that there will be a vote or that we will see support. And then not long after he says that, we see, behind-the-scenes conservative backlash. And then the speaker has to come out and, sort of move the goalposts to, save face for not holding what would likely be a potentially embarrassing vote for him. So it's not necessarily surprising at this point, considering we've seen this long happen time and time again. But it certainly isn't helping Republicans politically.
Now, Shane has a theory. I just want to quickly remind everybody, we're speaking with Justin Duckham of the Talk Radio News Service. You can check it out at talkradionews.com. You can follow Justin on Twitter at @JDuckham. Shane has a theory that, and I agree, that as we get close to the midterm elections, if Republicans see that they are going to lose in some districts that tend to have high minority populations, that they might start pushing for this at the last minute to try and recoup some of that minority vote. Do you think? And it really hinges on, Justin, whether or not they're able to keep these voting restriction laws in place. If they're going to be in place on Election Day, they're not going to have immigration reform. But if a lot of judges strike these things down and everyone's going to show up no matter what the color of their skin, the Republicans might be more motivated to do something on immigration. Do you think that is a possibility?
It is a possibility, but time is coming, pretty short. We have just about, I guess, like 8 months until, or 9 months until we have the election. So in order to get something broad and comprehensive done, they really would have to scramble, and they really would have to have sort of a last-minute Grinch change of heart. And, as optimistic as I would like to be on this, it's not something that I necessarily see happening, especially considering, Republicans at this point have nothing to lose by not doing it. They are pretty much the, clear winners of who's going to be taking the House this year. The Democratic Party has sort of written off the House and has now been investing most of their funds in trying to maintain the Senate. And I don't necessarily see a lot of the people who have been opposed to this in the Senate so far, where it has, taken the greatest leaps, forward in decades, really being able to have much power to do something at the last minute, especially when we have seen Republican senators who've tried to sway their party on this move forward. They've been summarily rejected. Marco Rubio, of course, is a clear example who put a lot of his political legacy on the line and tried to look like a bipartisan olive branch figure, and then was sort of painted by the Tea Party that once supported him as being a rhino, which really shows how fickle these conservative elements are.
And that's a complete outgrowth of gerrymandering. You're going to have senators that are for this because they've got to represent an entire state. When you have a very conservative Republican in the House who's been gerrymandered into a district that really contains little to no minorities, that's why it makes sense. The Senate passed bipartisan. The House isn't going to get to it. So I think you're right, Justin. They're not going to go for it this year. I think, though, maybe before 2016 we might get this.
Well,
that would make sense. But this is, again, something that we've been talking about, at least realistically, for about 2 years now. Something that is, going to have to be taken on. This is something that has, gotten additional fire following the 2012 election. And, again, we have not seen any, signs that this is getting, close to being done, at least not in the House.
Yeah. I mean, it's just shameful to me that the members of the House continue to block everything, continue to block legislation that so many Americans support, yet Democrats are already writing the House off. It shows how broken our political system is, that when you have huge issues like this that affect millions of people, and essentially it doesn't matter to representatives in the House at all. I mean, I can't even wrap my head around that. how on earth do we change that?
That really is a good question. If the Republican Party didn't get the message loud and clear in 2012 that they really need to sort of shape up, especially when it comes to matters like this, I don't know what to go to. Perhaps losing again in 2016, but even then, that seems to be a foregone possibility for quite a few of them, and I don't think they're really going to have any fires lit under the butt with that.
Well, Justin, unfortunately, we are getting a little Skypey on our end and losing you. So, but I really appreciate your thoughts on this. And I know you see the background stuff that a lot of us don't see because you get to be in the halls of Congress, although I don't know how you, I feel like you need to take a shower after being there because people there are just so, so gross. In the quick minute of or so we have left, tell us really quickly, how was Grenada and what was your experience like being in such a different place?
Well, it was fantastic. The reason I was down there was for a medical workshop hosted by St. George's University, as well as the Global Virus Network, which was co-founded by the researcher who co-discovered HIV. And that was absolutely fascinating. There was a lot of very intelligent public health, researchers who were there, including Dr. Gallo himself, the person who discovered the, link between HIV and AIDS.
Wow.
And, being able to be around him in such an interesting country and, just being able to kind of banter with him was, absolutely fascinating. I should mention, I have a tendency of getting compared to Paul Giamatti physically pretty frequently. And he, unprompted, sort of mentioned that I looked like him, and that was sort of a heartbreaking moment because I can't really say, well, he's just not that observant since he discovered HIV.
Oh, Justin, you cracked me up. No, it was really cool that you were there. The pictures were amazing and always fun to follow along with your adventures on Facebook. But thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we will talk to you again next week.
Hey, thank you, guys. You have a good one.
You too. Justin Duckham, everybody, of the Talk Radio News Service. You can check it out at talkradionews.com. You can follow him on Twitter at jduckham. He has such an adventurous life.
Yeah. Paul Giamatti, do you know who that is?
No.
He's an actor.
Yeah,
I'll mention some
you know
movies.
me. You know me with names of actors.
He's a fantastic actor.
I'm sure as soon as I saw a
Cinderella
picture of him,
Man, he was the boxing coach.
you'll have to tell me that on the break. I'll have to look him up. Yes. Yeah. Me and names of famous people, it just doesn't stick. I could tell you lots of senators and Congress people.
His brother's an actor too. He's in the show Judging Amy. Giamatti. Oh, okay. He's won an Oscar, Paul Giamatti is. He's really a fantastic actor.
I'm sure he is. I just.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Not my strong suit, but thank you to Justin, and hopefully he will be back with us next week to talk about more. We're going to be back here on Talking Left in just a few minutes. We still have Zach Ford of Think Progress and Jacob Dean of Filter Free Radio coming up in just a few minutes, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Whoa! Awesome! Totally awesome! All right!
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Now here's something you don't hear on the radio every day. Someone who can't see. I am totally blind. So I go through periods when I'm unable to sleep at night. And I feel like I'm constantly running, but can never quite catch up. But this isn't a sleep problem. It's something called non-24-hour disorder. Learn more about non-24 by calling 855-856-2424 or visiting learnmorenon24.com.
Because Jan switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on car insurance, her savings account wants to take her to a fireworks show. But it can't. It's a savings account. It can't read where the next fireworks show is in the local paper. Switch to Geico, and every time you see extra money, you'll know your savings account wants to take you to a fireworks show. But remember, it can't. It doesn't know how to read. It is, however, happy that you're saving money.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. On the Colbert Report, economist Paul Krugman called out the media's disastrous reporting of a Congressional Budget Office report that examined how the Affordable Care Act will impact the job market over the next 10 years. Here's what Krugman had to say about the widely repeated but false claim that the Affordable Care Act would cost jobs.
This is a really quite amazing piece of, I'd say a lot of media malpractice, because a lot of the news orgs got it completely wrong. There are a lot of people in America who are working extra hours, staying in full-time jobs because they need the health insurance. There's parents of young children, there's older people, who are 63 and not in good health, but they're hanging on with those full-time jobs until they can get Medicare. With the law in effect, a fair number, some people will work shorter hours, some people will retire earlier. So the total number of hours will be reduced. Voluntarily, people will choose to work less. No jobs lost.
Experts agree with Krugman's assessment. As the Washington Post fact-checker plainly said, quote, "No, CBO did not say Obamacare will kill 2 million jobs. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
And now, a few minutes of Nurse Talk on TuneIn's Progressive Voices channel.
Plus, in the afternoon, I'll be marrying George Clooney, after which I welcome Elvis.
That was the Queen of England prior to a recent announcement about her finances being in shambles.
39% of the royal estate remains in disrepair. That's a little misleading because 10% of that is Kate's uterus. And
Queen's income, $51 million.
so what are the Queen's budget cutbacks? Turn down the heat in the East Wing, sell off 10 cars out of the fleet of 40, and trim the staff from 700 to 650 and keep the darn lights off.
Turn off those damn lights. Were you born in a cave?
We're still hearing stories like Obamacare won't let me have the same doctor. I don't want to pay for birth controls for women. My Medicare payment went up because of Obamacare.
A lot of it is still half-truths and taking things out of context. I was prepared to not like almost everything about Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act, and I have to say I have been so pleasantly surprised.
A massive exodus of experienced nurses leaving for work in other hospitals after their hospital started making serious cuts that endangered patient care. They knew they needed to take action.
And I've worked in hospitals where they've cut services. Patients have had to travel long distances in order to get the care that they need, and it makes it dangerous.
They had issued our pay cuts and just basically said, we're cutting your pay. You have a month.
Things used to be good a couple years ago, and now they're not so good. So the trust and the loyalty in your employer, we had no reason to not trust them. They told us the reason that they were cutting our shift differential was to save jobs so they wouldn't have to lay off anybody.
I love it when they have to pit nurse against nurse.
Yeah. The Channel 4 I team has learned nurses will now be in charge of cleaning patients' rooms. I do not want my nurse mopping the floor when I'm asking for pain medications.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Somebody is hurting in pain and you got to say, I'm sorry, I've got to clean up on aisle 4 that I got to take care of.
Totally.
You've been listening to Nurse Talk. Be sure to join us for a full hour weekends on TuneIn's Progressive Voices channel.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are checking us out. We Act Radio, grabbing us off the iTunes podcast, or hanging out with us over at SoFloRadio.com.
Grabbing us, huh?
Yes.
Getting all handsy.
Sounds dirty. Welcome. If this is, we don't know yet if this will be the first show on Progressive Voices, but we will be there
We
soon.
are in good hands, and we are in George's hands.
Yes.
And he's amazing.
We were just talking to Justin Duckham of Talk Radio News Service about John Boehner's newest line about why he's not going to pursue immigration reform. And I wanted to focus on that for just a moment. According to John Boehner, we can't get immigration reform because Republicans don't trust the president. That sounds, yes, there was a cat stampede in the hallway. That sounds about as ridiculous as it is. Republicans have never trusted the president from the very day he was inaugurated. Republicans got together at the caucus room and,
Right. This is opposition to a bill looking for a reason.
Absolutely.
And they figured, well, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. That seems to have resonated. So let's latch on to that. For a little bit, it was they hadn't quite figured out their messaging yet. So it was, well, we shouldn't do really big comprehensive bills because look at this one over here. So let's not do something huge. Let's just give the money to all the border states. Let's give them the billions. And let's make sure that the tech companies can have cheap labor. Right. And then we'll deal with the other parts later.
Right. And that is the between the lines from John Boehner's press conference. He said, the reason I said we need a step-by-step common sense approach to this is that we can build trust with the American people that we're doing this the right way.
In other words, money for Republican governors and cheap labor for the billionaires.
Right.
That's their priority.
Yeah.
Period. That's their, and they're going to do that first, and then the other stuff. We watched what happened. Come on, they bailed out Wall Street, $700 billion, and said we'll reform it later because this is an emergency. You need to pass this now. And when we got to reform, oh no, we can't do that.
Right.
We can't. The consumer product. No. And even when you passed it, no, we're not going to fund that.
No.
Oh, you want ahead of it? No, we're not going to do that. Who can't be trusted here? Is it the
Exactly.
president or conservatives in the darn house? I'm sorry. It's bull.
So there.
And they,
yes.
I'm frustrated.
I know. Boehner came out criticizing President Obama for his executive orders, saying he keeps talking about his phone and his pen. He's feeding more distrust about whether or not he's committed to the rule of law.
Oh, because if he's not committed to the rule of law, that's read between the lines. What he's doing is illegal. Let me assure you, Congress, that executive orders are completely legal. The Supreme Court has said so. Now, the case was Korematsu, which had to do with FDR's Japanese internment camp. So it's not the best case in the world. But essentially, an executive order is not taking any power. Okay. Executive orders that operate within the laws that have already been passed by Congress are completely constitutional. Plain old. In fact, the Constitution says that the president shall execute the laws. And as part of executing those laws, there are executive orders. This is the way we're going to execute them. You gave us X amount of money to do Y task, and here's my order on how we're going to accomplish that. We're going to take this money and we're going to do this. Now, if he goes beyond, like George Bush used to do,
signing statements?
And I know a lot of people, we're hypocrites. Oh, you don't like it when George Bush does it, but when Obama does it, it's great, or the reverse. And that's just not the case. It's just not the case. Executive orders within the laws that have already been passed by Congress are completely constitutional. If you try to do something more than what Congress has given you the authority to do, then that's not constitutional. So they can sue him all day long if they want to on executive orders. But if it's within his discretion, it's fine. And I haven't seen an executive order yet that's gone beyond that, except for maybe some of the spying ones. Some, over the NDAA. I think some of those, and I think, I'm not, don't quote me on this, but I think Chris Hutt, I can't remember his name right now.
I have no idea who you're talking
Activist is suing over that NDAA and executive orders in there.
Well, but let's be real about which executive order the Republicans are talking about here.
Which one are they talking about?
The minimum wage increase to federal contractors. So you can't trust the president over his executive orders because he gave people a raise. That's what you can't trust. You're fine with giving, defense companies billions of dollars in step-by-step immigration approach.
I think that's a pretty dumb one to go after.
Well, and that's why they're not specifying. They're just talking about, scary executive orders, his pen, he gave people a raise.
And czars.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, look at Putin. Look at Putin. Czars. Putin, czars. Gulag.
Speaking of Putin, we're going to be talking next with Zach Ford of Think Progress LGBT and about Russia's anti-gay laws. Recently, the United Nations condemned those laws, and Zach Ford is going to talk to us about it next. How do we support Olympians when we don't support Russia's anti-gay policies?
That's a really good question.
It is. We're going to talk to Zach about that next, so don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle, and Shano, and we'll be back with Zach Ford of Think Progress coming up next.
What is this? What's going on?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
You know what America needs? More jobs, that's what. Not Walmart-style jobettes, but real jobs, stable ones, with a good salary and benefits. Union jobs, so workers have a say in what goes on. Jobs that have strong protections against discrimination. A job you could make a career, do useful work, take pride in it, earn promotions, and be respected for what you do. Believe it or not, there is at least one place where such jobs still exist. But and you really aren't going to believe this, those in charge are pushing like hell to eliminate them, turning positions that ought to be a model for American job growth into just another bunch of jobettes. The place? Your local post office. Right-wing government haters in Congress, along with the corporate executives now sitting atop the U.S. Postal Service, claim that in order to save this icon of Americana, they must decimate it. These geniuses are privatizing the workforce, selling off the invaluable community facilities and shrinking services. Hello, the workers, facilities, and services are what make the post office iconic and give it such potential for even greater public use. Their latest ploy is a partnership with Staples, the big box office supply chain. In a pilot program, 82 Staples outlets have opened, quote, postal units to sell the most popular and most profitable mail products. Rather than being staffed by well-trained and knowledgeable postal workers, however, the many POs will have an ever-changing crew of Staples' low-wage temporary sales clerks with weak performance standards and no public accountability. This is Jim Hightower saying, cheapening postal work might be good for a few profiteers like Staples, but it will diminish postal service, and it's exactly the wrong direction for America to be going. For info and action, go to apwu.org.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The National Labor Relations Board proposed a new rule this week that would shorten the process for union organizing elections. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says it's a step in the right direction. Teamsters President Jim Hoffa says his union supports the new rules. Hoffa says it will help stop companies from abusing the legal process to stall elections and delay the union organizing that workers want. The proposed rule change would require businesses to provide email addresses and phone numbers of employees to give unions fair access to the workers in an election. A similar rule was proposed 2 years ago, and business groups challenged it in court. NLRB Chairman Mark Pierce says the new rule will speed up union organizing elections, getting rid of delays and inefficiencies that hurt both workers and employers. At the United Auto Workers Legislative Conference in Washington this week, Vice President Joe Biden told UAW delegates that right-wing forces are waging long-term, intense, concentrated war on the House of Labor. Biden said unions like the UAW are the only ones keeping the barbarians from the gates. Biden says the right to collective bargaining itself is being attacked, and if unions vanish, Biden said, the middle class evaporates. Biden was hailed by UAW President Bob King as a strong and steadfast friend of the UAW.
I still know how to pronounce the word union. Union. One of our problems is not enough elected officials remember how to pronounce the word union. Everybody talks about workers. I talk about unions. Every other worker, white collar and blue collar, not a union member, has figured out the reason they had benefits in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s was because of organized labor.
Roughly 600 workers at 5 nursing homes in Connecticut operated by Healthbridge have had pay cuts imposed on them by bankruptcy courts. The cuts will average about $30 a week. Healthbridge runs 5 union nursing homes and 3 non-union nursing homes in Connecticut. In 2012, worker pensions were eliminated and their health care costs were increased. SEIU Local 1199 is fighting to protect the livelihoods of the workers, and Healthbridge is accused under federal law of alleged union busting.
Fear, intimidation, even racism is part of that plant every day. And we go through a lot of that. Put fear on the workers, we can control them. But they don't never give us a fair chance to say, why we need a union. We need a voice at this plant. And the intimidation and the fear, it really needs to stop.
Keep these worker and union voices on the air by supporting Workers Independent News. Donate now at laborradio.org. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Here at the GED Pep Talk Center, we've got a pep talk that can motivate you.
Sometimes things don't always turn out the way you want them to.
You can improve your future. Now get your game face on and take the first step towards a better life. Hurry up. Don't make me repeat myself.
Whatever level of motivation you need, we've got a pep talk for you. Call 1-877-38-YOUR-GED or visit yourged.org for your pep talk and for free classes in your area. GED is a registered trademark of the American Council on Education. Brought to you by Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. So you may have noticed that the Olympics are going on in Sochi, Russia, and in between the coverage of Russia's, upside down toilet seats and dirty water, there's also a lot of coverage of their anti-gay laws. Zach Ford of Think Progress LGBT, you can check it out at thinkprogress.org. You can follow Zach on Twitter at Zach Ford, has also done some great coverage, including the United Nations coming out and condemning Russia's anti-gay laws. Zach, thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate talking to you, and I'm just happy I get to say hi to you again.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here, Danielle.
How is it? I'm very conflicted. I said this to you in an email. I love Olympians. I am in awe of the lengths they go to get to that level of competition. How can we support them and still make it very clear that we do not support Russia's anti-gay laws?
Well, Danielle, that's a question that a lot of people have been wrestling with for, the past even 6 months or a year since we've known we're definitely going to Sochi next year. And the LGBT community at first responded by actually calling for a full protest or a full boycott of the Olympics, which isn't totally unprecedented. I mean, the United States boycotted the Olympics in Moscow in 1980. So it's not that we've never done it, but it's sort of the question of whether or not this gay propaganda law and some of the other human rights abuses we know about are precedent enough for us to do that. And we sort of strayed away from that. And so we're there, we're performing in the Olympics this year. And so I think the question is, I think we have to watch the Olympics. I think we have to support our athletes, but I think we also have to keep in mind what we've sent them into. What is the situation on the ground there? And especially how it will continue to be after we leave, and use it as an opportunity to raise awareness and to advocate on behalf of LGBT equality and just the basic human rights of people.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that the international pressure, including, from the UN and from the U.S. Against these laws, do you think that they'll have any effect, that maybe Putin will realize that in the eyes of the world, he is wrong for discriminating against the LGBT population in his country?
Is Putin going to realize that he was wrong? I highly doubt it. And I think part of my thought is that if there's lots of international pressure, but no baggage attached to that, no consequences, that's not going to change anything. And if anything, it might lead Putin to sort of retrench himself and say, no, if the West doesn't like what we're doing, we must be doing it right, and we're going to do it some more. So I think that kind of international pressure has to be through a certain lens. And I think, sort of what President Obama did by saying, hey, we're going to go and we're going to send a whole bunch of openly gay athletes as part of our delegation is the best way to undermine Putin, by saying, you don't want there to be any visible display of homosexuality, well, we're going to just send lots of visibility and kind of undermine you that way. So I think it's more about just sort of putting those messages out there that, being gay is normal, that being gay is not harmful to children, and that people are gay and competing in the Olympics is really what's going to make the bigger difference at hopefully opening some minds in the country so that they're not all going down this same narrow path that Putin's leading them.
Yeah, absolutely. I know the U.S. sent an openly gay delegation. We saw several nations come out in the opening ceremony in very pride-oriented outfits. What has been your favorite expression of people there, of people participating in the games, of the way they have supported the gay people in Russia?
I'm actually more impressed by the athletes that just take every opportunity they have to speak to the press to speak out about it. Athletes like Ashley Wagner, like Bodie Miller, who, they appreciate the situation that they're going into. They're confident athletes that don't need to like spend a lot of time talking about their sport. They're going to use their opportunities on the microphone to talk about what's really important to them, just making sure that it's a safe environment for everybody. So I really appreciate that. There's also, we saw our first like little display of advocacy when Cheryl Moss, who's one of the openly gay athletes performing, she had just finished a snowboard trial run, and at the bottom she flashed her glove, which had a unicorn and a rainbow on it, which seemed to be a pretty clear sign of her identity and why she was there.
Now, are our athletes or athletes from other nations, we know what's happening to Russian citizens who are living there and being forced to hide who they are. Are our athletes or athletes from other nations in danger while they're there because of these laws?
That's a really great question, Danielle, and it's sort of remains to be seen. You know, we've seen that Putin has said we're not going to enforce this gay propaganda law at the Olympics, which, okay, you're just going to not enforce a law, but you're acknowledging that it's still the law for people that are there. They've set up these protest zones, but they're like 6 or 7 miles away from the Olympics, so it's not like there's going to be a whole lot of athletes traveling out there to make a statement. So I don't really know if those are going to make a big difference. But, you know, just this week we saw Russians in St. Petersburg get arrested for showing a rainbow flag or a sign that like actually just quotes Olympic Charter Principle 6, which is that athletes shouldn't be subject to discrimination, or just holding a rainbow flag and singing the Russian national anthem. You know, I think we have to keep in mind that there's a narrative where we can put it in the context of how we think about American protests, right? For the most part, you can go out on the street by yourself and hold a sign, and no one's going to bother you. You know, we have some restrictions for like whole parades or marches or things like that, but most, you know, basic little demonstrations, you can go out and no one's going to, you know, be bothered by you. If you're interrupting someone, if you're disrupting someone, then maybe you'll be taken into custody, but just sort of, you know, maybe you'll get like a $50 fine or something. You know, it's not a big deal. But what's happening in Russia is anybody who shows any visual display or any intention of visual display, they actually think that maybe they had their phones tapped because of how quickly the police arrested these protesters. Not only are you arrested, but the people who've been arrested have said that they've been subjected to beatings, they've been threatened with sexual assault. So the circumstances that they're experiencing are very different than our own perceptions of what it means to just go out and do a little protest and possibly get taken into custody. So it's very dangerous. It's very scary and clearly a different kind of violation of human rights than we're used to thinking about with our own freedom of assembly.
Yeah. Wow. I hadn't even thought that far ahead comparing to our right to protest. I just want to remind everybody we're speaking with Zach Ford of Think Progress. You can check it out at thinkprogress.org, and you can follow Zach on Twitter at Zach Ford. I can't help but look at this, and while Russia's laws are obviously so much worse than the situation here in the States, but doesn't this focus on the anti-gay laws in that nation, doesn't it also kind of highlight stuff that's still wrong in our own, that LGBT people right here in this country are still just fighting for equal rights? I mean, is it hypocritical that our nation is criticizing Russia for what they do while we still haven't guaranteed people equal rights here?
Yes and no. I mean, it's definitely true that we are much, much farther along than where they are. And so it's not fair to just compare country to country. You know, we're not perfect, so we can't criticize them. I think we don't have people who are, you know, hunted and beaten down for being gay anymore, generally. We have some bullying problems. We have some street harassment problems, some hate crimes that take place, but we don't have, like, you know, gay hunting gangs. So I think we have to kind of at least allow for the different contexts. But I think what is important is that a lot of the motivation for the homophobic laws that we're seeing in Russia and some other countries is really an American export. We've had folks like Scott Lively, who's most known for his anti-gay advocacy in Uganda, Brian Brown of the National Organization for Marriage. These people and others have gone over to Russia, testified in front of the Duma and said, here's why, you should pass this law banning gay propaganda. Here's why you should pass this law banning adoption by same-sex couples. They've proposed laws that I think they're actually going to debate this month, even maybe while the Olympics are happening, that would, if you were married to a person of the opposite sex and you had a kid but you got divorced, this law would say that if you now identify as gay, that would disqualify you from having custody of your children. They're really going pretty far with this. And what they're doing is they're using the polished talking points that conservatives in the U.S. have developed over a couple of decades of working through this and applying them sort of fresh. So, we went through phases where we had people saying all gay people are pedophiles. We said that, all gay people recruit children into homosexuality. That's how it spreads. All of these sorts of myths about how it harms children. And the right in America has gotten pretty smart and said, well, we're not going to say the word pedophile. We're not going to say the word recruit, but we still want to imply it and remind people of that thought. And so we see things like the princess ad that we saw in the Prop 8 campaign. A little girl comes home and says, my teacher says that I can marry a princess when I grow up. Do you want this taught in your schools? It's the same message. And so that's what we're actually seeing in Russia, where they're justifying this gay propaganda law by saying, well, it protects children. It's okay if you want to be open about your identity. Just don't do it around children. Just, keep it away from children's eyes. Well, what they're saying is children need protection from homosexuality, ergo homosexuality is a threat to children. Well, what does that mean? It's pedophiles, recruitment, all the same old garbage that we know isn't actually true, and that's how it's being manifested there. So it's those same polished talking points, but being used in a much more dangerous fashion, because the country hasn't developed the same cultural awareness and acceptance that we have. So that's the real big difference between the two.
How can people listening, in the couple minutes we have left, how can people listening support gay people in Russia, support LGBT athletes, just show from here that we are watching and we support the protesters, we support the people who are putting their lives at risk for such an important cause. Are there any hashtags or specific things that people can use to just show that we're standing with them?
Well, I think just in general, talking about it here, keeping the conversation going on social media is a great way to just, be proactive about recognizing that this is an issue that needs more attention. One of the great things that LGBT activists here in the States have done is co-opt a social media campaign that International Olympic Committee sponsors like McDonald's and Coca-Cola tried to start with the hashtag Cheers to Sochi. And what's funny is the companies have not really figured out a way to deal with the fact that we've really taken over the hashtag. We have parody websites set up and everything, and we're using that hashtag Cheers to Sochi to really raise awareness about LGBT issues because people all over the world are seeing it. So that's one specific thing. But then you can also just keep an eye out for different LGBT groups in Russia, as well as international groups that are working to support the LGBT activists there. But again, that external influence sometimes is more problematic than it just supporting them on the ground. So I think it's more just having those conversations and keeping that awareness up that'll make the biggest difference.
Well, I think, the same goes for issues in our country and just being aware, showing that we care about these issues, we're involved in them, and we're continuing to fight for change. And you, Zach, are doing that on a day-to-day basis, and I commend you for it. Thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to speak with you and hear your thoughts on such an important issue.
Hey, it's my pleasure, and go USA.
Hey, absolutely. Go for the gold, and maybe we can put it on a rainbow ribbon. That would be even better.
There we go.
Zach Ford, everybody, of Think Progress LGBT. You can check it out at thinkprogress.org. You can follow Zach on Twitter and use the hashtag Cheers to Sochi. You heard it here from Zach. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle, and Shano, and we will be back with more, so stick around.
So, who is responsible for these outrages?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Phil
Filter-free radio.
Filter-free radio.
Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
I don't care who knows about what I'm doing. If it's just me and the universe, and that's all that knows about what I'm doing, that's fine with me. But I have this internal, some people call it a conscience, some people call it a moral compass. I have something inside of me that's telling me to do something, to show up, and I'm going to do it. And I'm sure that someone out there has a similar voice, or, I'm not saying like, I hear voices. Not like that.
Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Just the idea that it doesn't matter who's watching. It doesn't matter who cares. What matters is I know what I'm doing. I know what I believe in. I know what my morals are. I know that I'm standing up for them. And I know that I'm not going to give up. And if that means that everything else goes to in hell in a handbasket, then so be it. At least I know I can sleep at night.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. When Fox News host Bill O'Reilly interviewed President Obama before the Super Bowl, he showcased a laundry list of previously answered questions based on Fox's phony scandals. First up, Benghazi.
He testified that on the day that the ambassador was murdered and the 3 other Americans, he told Secretary Panetta it was a terrorist attack. Shortly after General Ham said that, Secretary Panetta came in to you. Yeah. Did he tell you, Secretary Panetta, it was a terrorist attack?
And then the IRS.
Douglas Shulman, former IRS chief, he was cleared into the White House 157 times, more than any of your cabinet members, more than any other IRS guy in the history by far. Okay, why was Douglas Shulman here 157 times? Why?
But Obama pushed back on O'Reilly, pointing out Fox's role in promoting the scandals.
Bill, that's not what happened. Folks have, again, had multiple hearings on this. These kinds of things keep on surfacing, in part because you and your TV station will promote them.
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
This is Tara Devlin, a.k.a. Pterodactyl from RepublicanDirtyTricks.com on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. And this is my 2-minute tirade. The president has declared
climate change is a fact.
But he continues to pursue a so-called all-of-the-above energy strategy, denounced by environmental groups as being at odds with actually cutting carbon pollution. You see, America's energy policy shouldn't just be to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, but to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels in general. Take the Keystone XL pipeline, for example. Let's get this straight. The Keystone XL pipeline will create only a handful of permanent jobs and will not lessen our dependence on foreign oil because it simply transports Canadian oil to American refineries for export to overseas markets. And yes, the state report said that building the pipeline will have a negligible impact on climate change. But that's because the carbon-heavy oil will be extracted and transported anyway, which is like saying, what the hell does it matter? Could you imagine if rather than focus on the filthy energy of the past, we focused on progressive solutions? Like, say, investing in a 21st century green civilian conservation corps. Put millions back to work while creating a green energy grid, high-speed rail, national solar bank. Revitalize national infrastructure and permanently reduce our carbon footprint. But the president's all-of-the-above strategy does have him taking action on climate change, while proudly presiding over a record boom in oil and gas drilling. Like a smoker cutting down to a pack a day while trying to treat that pesky emphysema. So with the State Department report, conservatives are thinking that the president will have no choice but to approve the Keystone Pipeline. And they're happy. Because only conservatives can look at the further attachment to the filthy energy of the 20th century and call it progress. This is Pterodactyl from RepublicanDirtyTricks.com. Keep listening for 2-minute tirades and more on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn.
Listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Big thanks to Zach Ford of Think Progress. One of my favorite people to talk to. I don't know why, but as soon as the first time I ever talked to him, I told him he was like my new best friend. He's awesome. He was...
And everyone. I think Progress is just, and the Center for American Progress, love them.
I think they deserve an associate producer credit for ours and every other progressive show out there.
I'm going to go with executive producer.
Yeah, they do amazing work. We were talking about Sochi and LGBT rights in Russia, and Eric Holder came out with a big announcement yesterday that the Justice Department is adding a whole bunch of new rights. And
well, they're not new.
Right.
They're not new.
But
they're now being extended to everybody.
That's a better word.
As a result of the case, the Supreme Court case and the DOMA ruling, saying that the federal government can't do this anymore. Here's Eric Holder, actually.
On Monday, I will issue a new policy memorandum that will, for the first time in history, formally instruct all Justice Department employees to give lawful same-sex marriages full and equal recognition to the greatest extent possible under the law.
There's one quote I'm looking for. I'm not sure it's in here, but I want it.
This means that in every courthouse, in every proceeding, and in every place where a member of the Department of Justice stands on behalf of the United States, they will strive to ensure that same-sex marriages receive the same privileges, the same protections, and the same rights as opposite-sex marriages under federal law.
How about that?
I think this is awesome news. And it plays right into the question that I was talking to Zach about, how do we call on another nation to improve rights for gay people when we still need to do it here? And I agree with his answer that, you can't necessarily compare two nations and you have to applaud the progress we've made here. Mm-hmm. But I am happy to see the Justice Department stepping up and saying, we're going to do as much as we can. We are going to ensure as many rights as possible to everybody,
right,
regardless of who they love.
You need to go back to Edith Windsor and her attorneys and fighting DOMA.
Right.
This goes back. This is not just Eric Holder being benevolent. There are a lot of people, a lot of progressives, a lot of supporters of equal rights who laid the groundwork for what is happening.
Yeah.
So in terms of, there's more groundwork to be laid and more equality to go around. So, this is a good thing. I'm very happy about it.
Right. These rights, these newly extended rights.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, I saw the Chiron on Fox, and they just said privileges. They focus on privileges because they want to make it seem like, I'm surprised they didn't put an entitlement instead, but their rights and their protections.
Yes. These include prison visitation, law enforcement benefits, court proceedings.
September 11th Victim Compensation Fund.
Right. These are
you can't be compelled to testify. There's a privilege.
Spousal.
What's called spousal privilege. So just kind of like attorney-client privilege. Everyone's heard about that one, or your doctor-patient or priest-penitent. There are certain conversations that the courts cannot compel you to disclose. One of them is marriage. If you are married, and this used to only apply to a male and a female marriage,
right?
That if for some reason your spouse is in trouble, you can't bring the other spouse in and force them to testify against their spouse. This will now be applied in federal courts for same-sex couples. It's an amazing thing because it's not like, well, why are you trying to stay out of trouble? No, it's the federal government recognizing that bond between two people, that they have to be open to be able to communicate without fear that the government's going to come throw you in jail for what you said to your spouse.
Right.
That's what it's about. And that is a protection. That is not a privilege. That is a protection.
Right. I think this is another great step towards full equality. I think we need to keep fighting. But I think the gains that we've made for the LGBT community as a nation show that getting involved does change things. That standing up for what you believe is right does have an effect. It might not be immediate. It might not be we get everything we want right away. But it shows clear as day that these things make a difference. And what can happen if we stand up like this for all the issues we care about.
Right. And just like we were talking at the beginning of the show, where if one state does something, the state next door may do it. When one nation does something, perhaps the nation next door will.
You never know. it's definitely a more hopeful way.
Or one across the Pacific Ocean.
Yes. All right. Well, we're going to get Jacob Dean, the host of Filter Free Radio. You can check it out at filterfreeradio.com. He's going to be with us next about all this and more for a full hour right here on Talking Left. I know.
I'm psyched.
I am too. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be coming back with Jacob Dean, and you do not want to miss it.
This is not normal.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Terrestrial radio, they don't want us Soyuz around no more, so...
They hit us, so hit them back.
SoFlowRadio.com.
It's Thursday, February 6, 2014.
Height of the spill, more than 82,000 tons of coal ash flowed into the river.
No end in sight for coal ash waste spill in North Carolina. Fracking depleting water supplies in drought-stricken states. Tesla electric cars now driving cross-country for free. Plus,
we don't believe that this is the way that we should be looking after what is one of the most important natural assets in Australia.
The Great Barrier Reef becomes a sacrifice zone for coal.
All of those sacrifices and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The Obama administration has a breakthrough in new energy. They're hooking Biden up to a gerbil wheel.
Finally, a good use for Joe Biden. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, Rachel Maddow had an interesting story this week. It's one I know you've been looking at for a while. We haven't covered it here. An attack with high-powered rifles on an electronic substation near San Jose, California. This happened last year. It threatened to take out a huge chunk of the grid, and it seems there's really no agency in the government who is out there looking at this and defending against this. Is this a real terrorist threat, one against our energy infrastructure?
Yes, it's a very serious threat, and one that the former chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has been warning about for years. The nation's ancient electrical grid is in desperate need of upgrades and repairs, and it is a huge security risk.
So really, there's nothing to stop someone attacking that, someone attacking, let's say, a chemical tank in West Virginia. It seems there's a lot of threats to this country that we're not focusing on, while spending a whole bunch of time and money and resources on threats that really aren't that much of a threat.
Yeah, that's what engineers and experts have been saying for years.
Speaking of threats, what do you have for us today?
Well, an update in that toxic coal ash waste spill in North Carolina. Coal giant Duke Energy still has not figured out how to stop that ongoing leak that has spilled an estimated 82,000 tons of toxic coal ash waste into the primary source of drinking water for Danville, North Carolina.
So how much coal ash is that? Well, get this. It's enough to fill about 32 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
That's amazing.
Water treatment officials say they are filtering out the toxins from the drinking water, but environmentalists say the contaminated sludge cannot be removed from the river.
It's our version of the BP oil spill. It just keeps right on contaminating the river.
Most Americans don't know using coal for electricity results in millions of gallons of toxic waste sludge every year that has to be stored in pits forever. There are over 500 of these unregulated, unlined waste lagoons around the nation. The EPA will finally issue the first ever federal rules for coal ash waste in December after the midterm congressional elections.
And many of those ponds, really, they're lakes, they're huge, are in danger of breaking, of busting, of the dams breaking and contaminating entire towns beneath them.
It's a very dangerous situation and one that has long been looking for some kind of oversight and regulation. Coal is also taking a bite out of the Great Barrier Reef. Environmental groups are protesting the Australian government's decision to build one of the world's largest coal export facilities right next to the world's largest and most famous coral reef system and dumping the sludge inside it.
What could possibly go wrong?
Millions of tons of dredged spoil material will be dredged out of the reef and dumped back in the reef's waters. We don't believe that this is the way that we should be looking after what is one of the most important natural assets in Australia.
Meanwhile, in the U.S., the controversial oil and gas drilling technique of fracking is expanding, and that's a problem for drought-stricken states like California and Texas. Fracking uses millions of gallons of fresh water for every well, and a new report from the investor group Ceres warns fracking is rapidly depleting fresh water supplies in the nation's driest states, warning that's going to be an issue for investors when the insatiable oil and gas industry is on a collision course with cities for water.
Some of the nation's driest states, like out here in California, facing historic droughts and low water levels right now.
Yes, and California has yet to establish really good regulations regarding water use.
And Governor Jerry Brown has approved fracking.
Yep. Finally, some good news. The electric car industry continues to expand. Tesla electric cars this week completed 2 cross-country trips in just 3 days using only electricity from Tesla's free supercharging network. That's an entire cross-country trip for free.
Oh, I got to get me a Tesla. Look, I got a green energy show, Tesla. Why don't you give me one? We'll talk about it on the show. Seems only right. For much more on that and the stories we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help sponsor the Green News Report, at least until Tesla does. Download us on iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn. Find us and like us on the Facebook and follow us 24/7 on the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, 10 years in the making, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
A long and winding road that leads.
Broadcasting live from Washington, D.C., this is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are checking us out. SoFlo Radio over in the chat room at talkingleft.com, or of course We Act Radio 1480 AM WPWC in Washington, D.C. And hopefully now live with us is the one and only, the host of Filter Free Radio, Jacob Dean. Can you hear us okay, Jacob?
I hear you just fine. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. You sound great.
He sounds better than us.
Well, cups of coffee, is mandatory.
Jacob Dean, for anybody who hasn't checked out Filter Free Radio, you can check it out over on the website and you can watch it live tomorrow. Jacob, what's coming up on Filter Free Radio? And please tease it so everybody makes sure to tune in.
Got a huge show coming up tomorrow. Thank you, Danielle. Getting into the political conversation that we try to maintain, we're going to dive into this essay from 1987 written by Bill Moyer titled The Movement Action Plan. And this is a really big deal. I think it's super important. And if everyone read this essay, we would all be in a much better position. It's a strategic framework for describing the 8 stages of successful social movements.
Wow.
And essentially the purpose is to give activists hope and empowerment and to increase the effectiveness of social movements and to reduce the discouragement that really comes from and burnout and dropout, and how folks kind of tend to, the Occupy movement didn't really go much past a couple of years, so, we kind of gave up on that. We're really going to talk about the successful strategic framework for successful social movements. I got to talk about a new partnership that we're developing with Open Debates 2016. We're super excited about that. We're going to reframe the debate and make a big difference and get alternative parties into the mainstream in 2016. And we're going to talk about how Facebook what's going on in Syria there, how terms of service can decide what kind of speech is okay. And of course, the activists are the ones that get silenced. And yes, I'm going to reveal the new puppy name.
Yay! Yeah, we're gonna ask for a pup date.
Yes, Shane said we have to get a puppy update, and then he came up with the term
pup date.
Pup date.
Pup date. Yes, the brand new puppy. She is doing fantastic. I got her a couple of weeks ago now, and on last week's show on Monday, we held a little puppy naming contest. I've got like 30 different name suggestions. If folks still want to send me one, Jacob at filterfreeradio.com, and I've got like over 30 of them. I have picked a winner. It is a J name, and I'm going to reveal the winner tomorrow on the show, and we're going to send out an autographed Filter-Free Radio bumper sticker to the winner.
Oh, you tease you. See, everybody has to... See, we talk about all this serious stuff, and it is important, and I know you care about all of these issues as much as we do, but somebody mentions a puppy, and we all melt.
Yes. We see the pictures are amazing. What an adorable little puppy dog.
Yes. That Bill Moyers thing that you mentioned is amazingly interesting. I heard Shane Googling furiously over there. I'm curious, because one of the things I actually planned on asking you about, and I'm curious of how it fits in, we are seeing huge movements for net neutrality, for against the TPP, the more than 300 vigils against Keystone XL. People are waking up and getting involved despite the fact that the corporate media is ignoring it. How does that play into Bill Moyers' steps of activism? I mean, is this a sign that things are changing despite the fact that the media is ignoring it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great first step. And essentially, this talks about how there's really 8 steps. And as we see, like the most recent example for me was the Occupy movement a few years ago. You saw in the first year, everyone was so pumped. Everyone was so involved, getting active. People were showing up. People were making a difference. But then, the plan kind of fell apart because there really wasn't much of a plan beyond, go occupy your local neighborhood park and fight for social justice. That's a great first step, but there's several steps that come after that in a successful social movement. And even speaking from personal experience myself, how easy it was to become discouraged by, the lack of major change that came from the Occupy movement, for example. It's so easy for people who are engaged and participating and active to become uninvolved and discouraged and despairing because, it's like, well, I mean, how long do I have to fight for social change?
Well, but don't you think on some level that that's what the corporate masters want? That's why they don't cover it on the media. Just net neutrality. More than 1 million people signed the petition and got involved over at freepress.net to say that we demand internet freedom, that the FCC needs to restore net neutrality. More than 1 million people. If there was 1 million Tea Partiers on the streets, Fox News...
Michelle Malkin claims that there are.
Well, but Fox News, MSNBC, all of these major corporate networks would be there with bells on. People are waking up. We can't let them win. We can't let the corporate billionaires succeed in convincing us that nobody really cares.
Exactly, and that's exactly what they're doing. I find it interesting that I've never heard of this Bill Moyer Movement Action Plan essay from 1987 until like 3 weeks ago. I think that's interesting, but it totally lays out like how you get the movement started, what to expect, and how to keep maintaining forward progress. And it's like a step-by-step pragmatic framework, and it's so easy to read. And I posted a link to it on our Facebook page. And essentially, there needs to be, like you said, Danielle, there needs to be activism and more people getting involved. And there needs to be this revival of democracy through people power. And it's going to happen. The Occupy movement was just the beginning. Folks are waking up. There's so many issues to get active in today. You name your pick. And that's the great thing, because we're all a little different. We all have different passions, and you can get active in whatever you're passionate about.
And whatever level of ability you have. If you are stuck working 3 jobs, cue George Bush, you can still tweet. You can still post stuff on social media. You can get your friends involved. You can still, take a second to call Congress. If you have a little more time, if you're one of these people who Congress, cut your unemployment off, get out there in the streets and join physical protests, depending on what people's ability is individually. And there's nothing wrong with any level of that. Every little bit counts towards actually making social change.
Oh, totally. Activism is not just showing up in the streets and protesting. I mean, there's activist artists, there's activist designers, there's activist musicians, you name it. And that's what's so great, is there's so many facets to it, and so many folks are waking up now and wanting to participate, and they're breaking down false paradigms that have been given to us from the beginning, trying to change how we think about things. How, like, people ask me, well, what is your goal? What is your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you mad at the government? Are you mad at the corporate state? Or what are you trying to do? And often I have to remind myself that my goal is not to go protest the government. My goal is not to go protest a corporation or the corporate state. My goal is to mobilize the people and to get the people active and participating. And that is a huge overlooked purpose of activism, is to simply get your friends involved, get more people to show up. And when we get 1 million people on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., outside the White House, it's going to be pretty hard for President Obama or whoever president is next to ignore it.
Yeah.
They're going to have to step up to the plate and make something happen. Like people talk about all the time. One of our last truly liberal presidents was Richard Nixon, not because Richard Nixon was a liberal, but because he was his hand was forced. The people made him do the right thing.
Yeah, I feel like we on this show rail against the corporate media. That's the I don't know, tagline, joke, whatever you want to call it, that, we try to be an alternative to the corporate Sunday morning news, because that's, you see the same people talking about the same talking points you've heard all week. And,
Amen.
And it's so frustrating to feel like everybody is ignoring the issues that we care about. And it's so easy to believe that everybody is apathetic and sitting behind an iPhone or watching Kim Kardashian. But really, if you look a little more closely, they're not. People are just as angry about these issues as we are. People are getting involved in the little or the big way that they can, and they are fighting to make a difference. And I think that no matter who owns these news media outlets, the major networks, that if these movements keep growing to the level that they're growing right now, they will not be able to ignore it. That people will see it on their street corner. People will see it on their social media feed and say, wait a second, everybody's getting involved here, and demand that they get some coverage.
Yes, and that's exactly what happened, in my opinion, with like the Occupy movement. A couple of people showed up. It was like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? More people showed up, more people got involved. But then it's kind of like it kind of fell apart because none of us really sat down and did our homework.
Mm-hmm.
No, none of us really sat down and planned out the next step or thought ahead to, okay, where are we going to take this? How does it progress forward? What do we do next? And I mean, I hate to keep going back to the Occupy thing. It's kind of stuck in my head. The big question was, okay, what's the next step for Occupy? And they never had one. We never came up with it. We didn't go there. And that's why the Bill Moyers Movement Action Plan is so important to me, at least in my opinion. And that's why we're really going to bring it home tomorrow on Filter Free Radio and really dive into this.
Well, and people have to check out that show.
Yeah.
I can see Shane over there reading. Obviously, you have piqued his interest.
Well, also because, Jacob, we spoke a year or two ago about the Anatomy of Revolution, and if you take the stages of that and you overlay it with the 8 stages here, they actually mirror each other quite well. And especially when you talk about, because you're going to talk about it in much more detail, so I don't want to steal your thunder. But the number 5, the activist failure in quotation marks, it's not really a failure, that greater powers come in and try to crush it out, but still it goes on beyond that.
Yeah, well, I think
it's all there. I love
think
it.
that's what we're seeing now, and I know we have to run to a break. That segment flew by because, Jacob, talking to you always gets me so fired up, and I mean, it's the perfect example of why people tune into your show, because you have that effect on people. We have to run to a break, but Jacob is going to be with us this whole hour, so you get an extra hour of Jacob Dean this week. We'll be back with more. We have so much stuff to talk about. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle, Shano, and Jacob Dean. Stick around.
Everyone expected just a piece of fluff, but we wanted to do something important. You know, issue stuff.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
I keep going back to this sports analogy, and I know that a lot of people aren't into the sports thing, and I get that. But, you know, if you got a team going up against another team, let's call them Team Democrats and Team Republicans, and let's say they play the same game over and over and over again for years and years and years and years and years and years and years, and they keep running the same play over and over again. Like the Democrats keep running the same play, the same exact play over and over again. Eventually, the other team's going to figure out, wait a minute, they're going to run that same play again, so we'll anticipate that, prepare for that, and make sure that doesn't happen.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
And so trying to solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions causes more problems.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Albert Klein. Many conservatives lashed out at Coca-Cola for their Super Bowl advertisement featuring a multilingual rendition of America the Beautiful. On The Five, Fox host Eric Bolling complained.
For whatever you gain in this diversity thing that you're going for, Coke, you blew it with a lot of people who are very, very patriotic about that song. About that song.
But anchorwoman Brenda Wood of WXIA in Atlanta demolished these myths in her segment, Brenda's Last Word.
But the fact that people are outraged over this ad is outrageous itself. People indignant that others would have the audacity to sing America the Beautiful in a language other than English when America was built on opening its arms to the world. The quote on the Statue of Liberty doesn't say, "Give me your English-speaking only Christian-believing heterosexual masses." It says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, tempest-tossed."
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
This is the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. Patriot-made audiocast. Morgan DeBrew is a marketing manager for Orion Rugs of Anderson, South Carolina.
Our total focus is on area rugs. We are totally made in the USA.
We met up with her in the spacious Orion showroom at the Atlanta International Gift and Home Furnishings Show.
I think the pendulum has swung back into the States rather than being proud of something being imported, and I think it actually means something to the consumer.
Orion employs over 400 folks in Anderson, South Carolina, which makes them a big part of the city of just under 26,000. While the company has a warehouse in Canada to handle its exports, everything else is domestic.
We actually are vertically integrated, and our yarn is made in-house in our Anderson facility.
The yarn is made from domestically sourced polypropylene, which is a sort of plastic.
Small pellets that are then extruded, and yarn is produced in filaments from that.
Morgan says that the yarn and finished rugs meet all U.S. fire safety regulations.
We have to abide by many flammability tests.
And that Orion is proud to be green.
We are a zero landfill manufacturer. We have created a team called the Growing Green Team.
The company has been zero waste to landfill since 2008. So if I went into Anderson, I mentioned that I wanted to buy an Orion area rug, the whole town would know about you guys?
You're exactly right. They definitely would. They would probably know exactly where we were, right on Highway 81, and would know how to get there for our manufacturing facility as well as the outlet store in our area.
Thank you, Morgan DeBrew from Orion Rugs of Anderson, South Carolina. I'm Rita Rich, Patriot Made. This is the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. And for this hour, special guest host Jacob Dean of Filter Free Radio. You can check it out at filterfreeradio.com. You can follow on Twitter at Filter Free Radio. And you can't miss tomorrow's show by what Jacob has been teasing us with. Jacob, before the break, you were talking about Occupy. And while I think a lot of people and a lot of the media have tried to play like Occupy has completely dissolved and it hasn't done anything and it didn't succeed in changing anything. You know, we see in Seattle, Kshama Sawant, a socialist candidate who called herself an Occupy candidate. And I think it's important to point out that even years after Occupy started, it did make change. It did prompt a big change in Seattle. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. We covered that when it happened a few weeks ago. It was huge news, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm up here in Portland, Oregon. So we're, not only are we celebrating the Seahawks, we are celebrating the first socialist Occupy movement candidate on city council in like forever.
Yes.
Hell yeah. And it's fantastic. And people, my co-host on Filter Free Radio, Mr. Skeptical Scott, he doesn't like to talk much about changing the way things are from inside the system. He's primarily focused on changing things from outside the system. But the truth is it can happen both ways. And that is the perfect example of change coming from within the system using the traditional ways and means that we've done forever. And when you throw your support and you vote for, the alternative parties, that you're voting, not only are you voting for your conscience, you're not compromising your morals, but you're voting for a real sustainable solution.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm not seeing much of that coming from the establishment parties. The status quo doesn't really want to change itself. It's working just fine for them. Thank you very much. I mean, yeah, we'll get marriage equality and we're going to get, legalized marijuana and this and that. But I mean, what about a living wage for a minimum wage? Or what about a maximum wage for the corporate state?
Hey,
what an idea.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you bring that up. I think there's a new piece of legislation that could have a big effect on that, and it's House Resolution 20, introduced by John Sarbanes, called the Government by the People Act. And I think this is a really important way that it could elevate candidates like you're talking about, candidates like Kshama Sawant, candidates who refuse to bow down to the corporations in order to get money by greatly increasing the power of small contributions. Have you read up on this? Are you familiar with the Government by the People Act?
Yes, and it's a great step in the right direction. People should get their support behind it.
Yeah. I mean, for anybody who hasn't heard about this, it has key provisions. It will increase individual small donations 6-1. It'll give small donations a tax credit of $25. It will enhance matching funds in the last 60 days of an election so that the outside spending groups don't have such a big impact. And what I really like is it creates a people PAC so that individual voices like me, like Jacob, like the people listening to this show, can combine together to demand some action on the issues they care about. I'm like, heck yeah. I mean, of course, we still need to deal with Citizens United. We still need to deal with other issues. But I think this is a great way to increase the power of candidates that actually listen to the people.
Heck yes, it is. And there's a lot of folks already gearing up for 2016, doing what they can now to make a difference. We are partnering with the folks at OpenDebates2016.com. Actually, a friend of mine, Zach Carter, they were the folks who put together the alternative parties, the third-party debates back in 2012 that was carried live on Aura TV, on Link TV, on Free Speech TV. Mr. Larry King and Mr. Tom Hartman narrated it. They put it together in 2 months. They put all that together in 2 months for 2012, and they're already working on 2016 right now for 2 years in advance. And that's one more thing. People are saying, yeah, maybe we should widen the debate a little bit. For starters.
Yeah. One of the issues I always say is we need to push people who support the third party candidates. I think the best way to do that is to support instant runoff elections, to support changing our local voting policies so that you can feel completely comfortable voting for that third party, that Green Party, or hey, if you're on the right, voting for that Ron Paul candidate, and not feel like you're surrendering your vote to the other side. But, that's just my opinion.
In a perfect world, in my opinion, we all get behind like the Green Party or the Progressive Party candidate, and they get something like 10, 15, 20% of the vote. Not enough to win anything, but enough to say, holy crap, look at how much everybody voted for him. And then my opinion would be if that happens, the Democratic Party will begin to shift itself back towards the left, and we need to be pushing left as far as we can go.
Exactly. Well said. See, look at how brilliant Jacob is. This is why you need to listen to Filter Free Radio. We do have to run to a quick break, but we will be back with more Jacob Dean, as well as me, Danielle, and Shano. You're listening to Talking Left, and we'll be right back. Stick around.
I'm David Schuster, and you're listening to my favorite show other than my own, Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Boy, just when you think the uber rich couldn't get any more narcissistic or nutty, along comes Tom Perkins. He suddenly forced himself on us with a loud, self-pitying whine, which he let loose in a January letter to the Wall Street Journal. Perkins is a billionaire venture capital huckster who's not content to count his multitudinous blessings, but instead wants us to know how terribly difficult it is to be rich in America. I perceive a rising tide of hatred of the successful 1%, he wailed. If he had stopped there, he would have revealed himself as just another ridiculous old and crotchety billionaire. They do seem to be a dime a dozen these days. But Perkins has no brakes on his peevishness. So he hurtled right into the swamp of extreme nuttiness, asserting that, quote, the progressive war on the American 1% is like Nazi Germany's war on its 1%, namely its Jews. I thought, surely this guy is not real. Maybe he's a made-up character in one of Stephen Colbert's satirical skits. But no, Perkins ranted on, insisting that just as anti-Semitism led to the rounding up of Jews in the hellish Kristallnacht of 1938, today's, quote, demonization of the rich would lead to a similar horror for America's wealthy minority. Yeah, Tom, we see your point. Being a billionaire is as terrible as being subjected to the Holocaust. This is Jim Hightower saying he has since offered a lame apology to, quote, any who have mistaken my reference, but still he's consumed by a whimpering narcissism, moaning that everyone now hates me. I don't know if Perkins has any loved ones around him, but if not, he should rent one, someone who will gently take away his writing implements and put him in a comfortable chair in a dark, quiet room, so he can be alone with his thoughts and never bother us again with any of them.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the Lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the Lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Another U.S. Senate vote trying to restore lost unemployment benefits is expected as soon as this week. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says 1.7 million jobless Americans need the lifeline of jobless benefits restored.
It's absolutely shameful that we are already 2 months into a new year and we're still debating renewing a lifeline for America's workers who can't find jobs through no fault of their own.
Sherry Minkoff of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is one of the workers cut off from the badly needed benefits.
My heart is broken thinking that too many of the people we elected to serve and represent us could so callously turn their backs on their own constituents, people who are suffering through no fault of their own. This behavior is reprehensible, and it's time for it to stop. Enough is enough. It is time to vote to renew federal unemployment insurance now for more than 1.6 million Americans.
The Senate cloture vote being sought by Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island and Senator Dean Heller of Nevada would extend the benefit for 3 months. It would use pension smoothing to pay the $6.4 billion cost of extending the benefits. That lets companies use historic data to pay less into pension plans, resulting in more taxable company revenue to offset the cost of extending benefits. Says it meets the key Republican demand that any extension be paid for.
The agreement gives the Republicans exactly what they have demanded. There is nothing they can say to justify any more delay. And it would be unconscionable for Republicans to continue blocking this lifeline.
One of the biggest marches against state policies in the South since Selma in 1965. That's how North Carolina NAACP President, Reverend Dr. William J. Barber III, describes the Moral March on Raleigh this coming Saturday.
The Moral March on Raleigh is a part of the anti-racism, anti-poverty, pro-labor, deeply moral, forward together movement. And with diversity and solidarity, thousands will stand against what we believe are morally indefensible, constitutionally inconsistent, and economically insane policies being passed by our North Carolina by the governor of this state.
Saturday's march is part of the Moral Mondays Forward Together movement, which last year resulted in 1,000 civil disobedience arrests at its Moral Mondays protests at the North Carolina Capitol. The nearly 800 RNs and healthcare workers at L&M Hospital in Connecticut have ratified a new contract agreement. At one point, the nurses and health workers, represented by AFT Locals 5049 and 5051, were locked out by the hospital. Local 5049 President Lisa Dabrowska said this settlement is more than just new contracts. She says it's a blueprint for caregivers and the hospital administration to change their relationships for the better. L&M Hospital says both sides are gratified and encouraged to have this difficult period behind them. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Okay, so 5 tacos of cheese and a large soda, that's $10,012. Please drive around.
Wait, 10,000 what?
It's obvious you're buzzed and driving.
I've only had a few. I'm fine.
Yeah, the food's $12, but getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Please drive around. Actually, just park and come in.
Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving. Because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and our special guest host for the hour, Jacob Dean of Filter Free Radio. You can check it out at filterfreeradio.com, and it's now available on your Stitcher app. Congratulations on that, by the way, Jacob.
Woohoo! We're super excited.
Yeah, that's a very big deal. That's awesome.
I finally got myself one of these GPS tracking devices, aka the smartphone, for Christmas. So I figured, might as well get us on these things, I guess.
Yes. So now you can listen to Filter Free Radio while the NSA is listening. Hey, that probably increases your number of listeners, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm surprised at the feedback we've got on Stitcher so far. It's great news.
Yeah, very big deal. We haven't had a chance to speak with you since the President's State of the Union address, which I have to say left me yelling at the TV. And one of the talking points he used that really grates on my nerves and gets under my skin is this American energy independence garbage. And that always makes me think of Keystone. We saw 300 or more protests around the country against Keystone XL, and yet we're still hearing, excuse me, even in some of the quote-unquote left-wing media, that it's going to be here anyway, and it's safer than trains, and it's safer than trucking all of this dirty, toxic
It's better than
sludge.
a needle in your eye.
Exactly. What are your thoughts on this, and how on earth how is the left agreeing to this?
Dun, dun, dun. It's unfortunate. It's one of those things. It's kind of like, yeah. It's just going back to what we were just talking about with the framework of social movements. It's kind of like in the beginning, everyone's all, big gung-ho, shut down KXL. There's a big problem. You see protests, hundreds and hundreds of protests, not just in the United States, in Canada. You got the First Nations up there. And then, a year later, a little bit less, 2 years later, it's like no one knows about what KXL is. 3 years later, Obama's pushing it through. And 4 years later, we're all behind it. And why is that? Well, you got to follow the money. But I talk about the environment all the time. It's not like one of those small issues where, if it goes one way or the other, it's not going to affect the existence of the human species. Right?
Yeah, it's kind of important. just you may want to pay attention.
And I'm just of the mindset that I, as a human being, need a proper environment in which I can exist. If it's too hot, if I can't breathe the air, if I can't drink the water, I can't exist. And I just really honestly want a better tomorrow for everyone, not just myself, but everyone. And when it gets to the point where the sky really isn't blue anymore, I mean, there's parts in places on the other side of the world where it's so bad, you can see the pollution from outer space. You can't go outside without some sort of breathing mask on, or else you will die. It's kind of like, well, good planets are hard to find. Yeah, they got a little thing on the moon and they're trying to get to Mars, but I don't think we're going to get there that fast.
Right. Well, and there's this myth that has permeated, even, as I said, the quote-unquote left-wing media. You have to put that in quotes because it's not really that far left. If we don't approve Keystone, they're just going to be bringing it in on rail and train. And, 2013 had more oil spilled from trains than the entire 4 decades combined. So they're pointing to this, saying, trains aren't safe enough. We need a pipeline, while people who have worked on the pipeline, whistleblowers, are saying the pipeline's not safe. You're trading one bad source of energy for another. Why aren't more people saying, instead of investing billions of dollars in a pipeline, I don't know, how about investing billions of dollars in wind farms and solar farms and ways that we can use energy without destroying the planet?
Oh, that just makes way too much sense, Danielle. That's not going to happen. I know that Thom Hartmann has talked about multiple occasions how this, if they follow through on this Keystone Pipeline, I mean, you want to talk about a target for some really nasty terrorism, and that's like no secret, there's so many pieces to a very complex puzzle. But if you break it down and you say, well, we need to be energy independent. Well, I'll tell you what, the best sources of energy can't even be outsourced. You're talking about the solar and wind. And it's just like you said, Danielle, the fossil fuel industry, keyword there, fossil, as in like really old and outdated and should be like gotten rid of. The fossil fuel industry is so subsidized by taxpayer money. We're giving them taxpayer money because they make billions and billions and billions of dollars like they don't have enough money to begin with. What if that money was redirected to like a better purpose for the future and solar and wind, and it would drive the cost down of, I mean, just since like, 5, 6, 7 years ago, the cost of solar manufacturing has been cut in half, or more so. And I mean, it's almost to the point where it's like kind of about the same price if you're going to do solar or if you're going to, go to your local energy company, et cetera. And it makes sense. There is no reason why we should not be getting behind solar energy and wind energy, unless you just happen to be making $1 or $2 or billions off of fossil fuel.
Right. And that's just talking about the direct oil subsidies, the direct ways the government subsidizes these disgusting, dirty fuels. If you add in the extra costs, I mean, look at what's going on in North Carolina with the Dan River. You look at what just happened in West Virginia with the Elk River. These are oil and fossil fuel related companies. This is oil and fossil fuel related byproducts and toxic waste. When you factor in those costs, oil is actually more expensive.
Yeah, do the math, follow the money. It's not, and the best part about it is like it's kind of transparent. It's it's just people are ignoring it, and it's right there in front of us. And it's like, you know, when you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, it's like you drained out all the oil, right? And now you've got to go down into the ground and blow up the ground so you can create cracks and crevices to get deeper into, I'm talking about fracking, to get deeper into, to get the last little, I mean, really squeeze that turnip, you know what I'm saying? It's like, come on. Even the people who are running the fossil fuel industry know that their business models are going to run out. It is not sustainable. But in the meantime, you see all of the big rats scrambling for the last bits of cheese before the ship goes down because, hey, they're doing just fine. Thank you very much. And, oh, goodness, it's it's enough to make you want to not drink coffee on a Sunday morning, you know? You don't...
Especially if your water's coming from one of those two rivers.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, even fracking. You know, Shane and I were watching the State of the Union, and the president constantly says this, everything under the sun, clean energy approach, but yet people who know better are banging their heads up against a wall because you know that when he says that, he also includes fracking and nuclear. Hello, Fukushima, do we need any more evidence that nuclear is a bad idea? Do we need any more evidence that fracking is not clean energy? Yet, here he goes, talking about it as if it's completely acceptable that it's green.
I've got to believe that, you know, and I'm just speculating. I've got no proof. I don't have facts to back this up, but there's some sort of money. I mean, follow the money. Yeah. Somebody somewhere is paying somebody to say something. It's not that hard. And, you know, I mean, I do really respect and love President Obama. I really do.
But
that said, but come on, man. I mean,
yeah.
Backbone. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for your morals. Stand up for the people who got you elected and do the right thing. I mean, on the other hand, though, and this is something that I've believed from the beginning. I mean, the truth is, I mean, and we talk about all sorts of things, but the reality is President Obama has got more like death threats from crazy, you know, there's a black man in the White House, you know, and the guy is kind of limited on what he's going to do. Yeah, he's going to campaign as a revolutionary to get elected, but once he gets into office, I mean, to be honest with you, the truth is, if my life was threatened on a daily basis, I would be very careful about what I did. And that's the truth.
I've often wondered why there was so much of a change. Shane, I know you and I have talked about it, where is it the system itself that, you know, he gets into office and realizes that maybe he doesn't have as much power as he thought he was. He didn't have as much pull in Congress. It's very easy to blame Republican obstructionism. But the fact of the matter is, I just don't think he's a real progressive. I think he's a Democrat, but he's not a progressive.
And remember, he ran on hope and change. And it was like a Rorschach test. You could see into it what you wanted to see. And that's very popular because, oh, that's my idea. I like that idea. But he never really said it. In order to get, the problem is we have a system that has, you know, institutions become ingrained and they become self-protecting. And in order to change that institution as it goes longer and stronger, it protects itself and prevents outsiders from getting in that will change it. it becomes more homogenized, it becomes harder to be president without paying homage and saying the lip service to the people who give you the money. And that's why Inside Out is so important.
Yeah. That's why you have to change the system. That's why you have to work within the system that's already there, get elected, and then say, screw you billionaires, screw you corporations. I'm going to do what's right for the people. And if that means I'm a one-term congressman, senator, president, so be it, because you can have a lot of effect in 4 years and 6 years.
There has been some changes, though. I'm sorry but
there has.
Because he said, I'd rather be a great one-term president than a mediocre two-term president. I remember him saying that.
Yep.
And I think that kind of went out the window in about year 2 or 3. But just me.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I'm so with you. And, just if you look back over the course of history, look at all the people who historically have stood up for, the working class, the poor people, all the people who said, we need to love each other and work together. We need to be peaceful. We need to treat everyone as equals. You look at the people who did that, JFK, MLK, John Lennon, who am I missing, right? Yeah. You see a pattern, right?
Yeah.
So
but you can also say FDR and Johnson.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't always end poorly.
Right. And I just, there's always that in the back of my mind, sure. But it's always, what seems to be the most appropriate fit, if the shoe fits. And to me, it's the money. You got to follow the money. There's got to be some money somewhere.
Well, hey, and that brings us right back to the Government by the People Act and Move to Amend. These are ways we could get involved to try and limit the effect that money has on our political process. It's going to be hard to get a constitutional amendment to change Citizens United, but we could be calling every lawmaker in the country saying, you better pass the Government by the People Act, because that would put power back in the hands of ordinary people.
Yes, it's exactly what we need. We need the revival of democracy. We need to shut down the dollarocracy. We need that revival of democracy through people power, because the fact that the power is become centralized in the corporate state, and and you combine that with the corporate media carrying out essentially the political process. Now we have the system essentially has effectively eliminated most of the citizens' voices, most of the citizens' participation in the decision-making process, and the centralized decision makers, the power holders, they now make these decisions in the interest of themselves, in the interest of the people who fund their elections, in the interest of the 400 billionaires that own more than a third or fourth of the world, right?
Right.
They're not doing it for us. And I mean, you go back to the candidate that raises the most money wins 95% of the time. That tells me that their number one priority is to make sure that their campaign funders are happy, not necessarily their constituents.
Right.
But, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, but the people have the power. The people are the most powerful organized force on the planet is we, the people. And power ultimately resides with the people. History is full of examples of when people get inspired and motivated and get involved in social movements, we achieve social political change. We topple tyrannies. I mean, they shut down dictatorships. And the people in power know this. They know that they got to make sure no social movements arise. They know that their power depends on the support of the mass population.
Yep. But the mass population is getting involved. We're seeing it with the TPP, with Keystone, with net neutrality. We are seeing it, and I think it will make a difference. We have to run to one more break, and we will be back with the last few minutes here of Talking Left with me, Danielle Shano, and Jacob Dean. Stick around.
A beautiful place full of wonderful things just waiting to be experienced.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
I'm David Pakman, host of The David Pakman Show on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. Check out my show at davidpakman.com. That's David, Pakman.com. I told you last week we would continue to follow the negotiations on the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is a huge kind of a trade and regulation and business enhancement, for lack of a better term, bill. And the latest news is that President Barack Obama's push to, quote, fast track the TPP has been at least temporarily blocked by none other than Democratic Senator from Nevada, Harry Reid. Harry Reid saying no. He's just saying he's not going to fast track it. He opposes the bill that would fast track the Pacific Rim and European Union pacts through Congress, of course, with the limited debate and no amendments, which the White House insists is crucial to gaining concessions from other countries to finalize the deals. There is this tendency in the political world, Lewis, to create urgency where there is really no definitive need for urgency. In other words, the reason all of a sudden why TPP must be fast-tracked is because if we don't fast-track it, it'll eventually pass anyway, but we will lose the concessions we've negotiated with other countries. Well, listen, if that's the case, if such a huge deal that affects so many areas of people's lives in so many countries really hangs in the balance of fast-tracking it with no debate or amendments, almost no debate and no amendments, in order to maintain concessions from other countries, there's a problem with the entire structure around the negotiation of this pact.
Right, and that's if we even believe that's the reason for fast-tracking it, which personally I don't. I mean, it seems that this entire deal is a complete abomination, if you will, and hurts and will eventually just hurt the majority of American people. I mean, a lot of people are comparing it to NAFTA, which was a disaster. And it just seems to me that fast-tracking it is a way to slip it under the radar.
Of course, big corporations would benefit significantly from TPP. They would have their power leveraged by strengthening copyright and patent law in their favor. They would also get more freedom as a result of very vague and, I think, deliberately ambiguous regulation, although it's not really regulation, it's really lack of regulation when it comes to protecting the environment. It's clearly a huge win for multinational and transnational corporations around the world. It's not clear to me exactly how Americans benefit from it, and maybe that's part of the issue. A White House official says that they are not surprised about Harry Reid's opposition to the bill. I'll be honest, Harry Reid to me is basically a status quo, plutocrat, duopoly, insider type of guy. To the extent that he opposes this, for whatever reasons he's opposing it at the time that he decides to slow it down, I'm in favor of that. And it doesn't matter what else I agree with Harry Reid about or disagree.
Right. It's a good thing. If anything, it will give some people more time to actually study it and learn what it's about. Will it stop the whole deal? Probably not, but that would be nice.
You've been listening to part of the David Pakman Show on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. For full audio and video podcasts, interviews, and much more, check out our website, davidpakman.com. That's David, Pakman.com. And check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to the last few minutes of Talking Left here with me, Danielle Shano, and our guest host for the hour, Jacob Dean. You can check him out at Filter Free Radio, filterfreeradio.com. You definitely want to listen in tomorrow for some really cool stuff from Bill Moyers and the long-awaited Pup Date. Jacob, just a quick minute or so rundown to remind everybody why they need to tune in to Filter Free Radio tomorrow.
Huge show coming up tomorrow. We're going to get into Bill Moyers, the Movement Action Plan, and how successful social movements happen. We're going to get into Open Debates 2016, how we need to widen the debate, widen the conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about how Facebook is censoring, thanks to its terms of service, can decide now what kind of speech is okay. And guess who's getting silenced? And of course, we are going to get into the puppy naming contest and announce our winner, announce the winning name, and send off a bumper sticker. And if I may, really quick, we're going to tease and talk about a super exciting, huge announcement, our brand new website that would not be able, or it wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Shano, man. And Shano has been helping us so much with our website. He created our website. We're working on redoing it. And dude, I can't thank you enough.
It's going to be awesome. I love it. It's so much fun. I love it. And it's, it's going to be cool. It's going to be on your apps and on your iPads. And I mean, it's really cool.
Yeah, very exciting. Filterfreeradio.com. So in our talk about changing the system and getting more progressives in office, Jacob, I don't know how much of a realistic chance this is to happen, but I came up with a new theory this week, and I wanted to tell you about it. So Max Baucus was approved as the ambassador to China, and the Montana governor appointed John Walsh, another Democrat, to his seat. So what I was thinking is that other Democratic governors can nominate, President Obama can nominate more Republican senators or even, right-wing Democrats for ambassador positions, and then Democratic governors can fulfill those seats. And what we were thinking a great place to start was the Kentucky senators. You have, Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell.
And there's a Democratic governor.
Exactly.
It would work out perfectly.
Yes. Rand Paul.
Genius.
Rand Paul could be the ambassador to
Somalia. I was thinking Somalia because he likes libertarianism.
Yes.
It's lawless. Perfect. You can have his little petri dish of libertarianism.
Yes.
That would work out great.
And Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, I love your idea for this
Mitch McConnell we can appoint as the ambassador to the Galapagos Islands.
I can go see my people.
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
Mitch McTurtle in the Galapagos.
He would have a lot in common with the residents of the Galapagos.
They have a lot of turtle trails. Turtle tunnels. Tunnels.
It may not be realistic, but don't you think that's an excellent idea?
Anything to get those guys out of here, man. I'm for it.
I would love to see Rand Paul's State of the Union response from Somalia.
I'm curious on how the internet connection is from there. Yeah. Maybe he'd look into the right camera.
Speaking of which, we just saw Captain Phillips last night.
Yes, we did. Yeah. But Jacob, thank you so much for joining us for this hour. It was so much fun having you on, and you are so great at inspiring people and reminding them of why and how to get involved. And that is something that is such a valuable function in independent media.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I always appreciate the opportunity. I love you guys. Keep up the good fight, man.
Absolutely. And thank you, of course, to everybody else, We Act Radio, SoFlo Radio, and thank you to Progressive Voices. Thanks to Rocky Mountain Mike, to Boca, and everybody. And thanks for the listeners. You're the reason we do what we do, and we'll see you guys next week. Tune in to Filter Free Radio tomorrow.